dismantled the clockwork mechanism, Uncle Eligius had told her. The automata will not move. You do not want them to move. As she turned the key in the lock, she remembered that figure had held its sword down by its side on her first visit. The probate dragged on for another month. Sarah was forced to make a third visit to the museum. As she approached the last 6 cases, she saw that 2 were open. On the floor, tangled up together, were the automata that had occupied them. Heart thumping, Sarah detoured into the next aisle to pass them and ran for the door. She reached it and turned around for one last look. She realized they'd stabbed their swords into each other. The floor beneath them was stained with something dark. It couldn't be blood, she told herself. These are automata. She slammed the door, locked it quickly, and took off across the churchyard. The probate was granted 2 days later. Albertus Magus appeared on her doorstep the next day. Sarah took him to the church straight away. All yours, she said as she unlocked the door. She turned her back on him and strode off. She got halfway across the churchyard when something brushed her cheek. A black film covered her eyes, dimming her vision. She screamed and batted at it. The darkness lifted. All around her, black squares were rising out of the ancient graves. They fluttered like fine silk handkerchiefs, moving towards each other, gathering into a vortex of black above her head. When the last square had been absorbed, they whooshed towards her. The film of black passed over her head and floated towards the church door. It seeped through the wood, disappearing inside the church with its hideous models. Moments later, Sarah heard a metallic sounding scream. Another followed it, then another and another. More black squares rose from the graves, floating towards her. Sarah screamed and ran to the lich gate.
Good.
Well done, Wendy.
So, Wendy, do you have any supernatural tales to tell us?
Not particularly supernatural, but something more a bit metaphysical than that. About 20 odd years ago, I was on holiday down in Devon and went to Knightshays, one of the National Trust properties there. And they have, well, an arboretum and quite a big forest too. But in the arboretum part, I was wandering around and I had a little summer house where you could sit and just watch and listen. And I sat there and listened to the sort of whispering of the wind through the leaves, quite just a gentle rustle. And it was actually almost leaving my body at that point and becoming something quite luminous and almost melding with the trees. It was very if I'd become just energy rather than a body. It was something that only lasted a few seconds, really, quite transient, and I've never felt anything like it since.
Wow.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Really interesting.
Ooh. Right, I'll read my story now. This wasn't the one that I was going to read. I'm rearranging my office and the one I was going to read has been organised to death. Right, it's called Clinker and it's quite a short piece. His breath smells like the wine Grandpa used to drink. The smell transports her to a swing in a garden on a sunny day. Mushrooms growing in the grass. The smell of cooking wafting, the happy banter of the grown-ups coming like music from the house. The sky is a blue cocoon and she is a tiny chrysalis, safe in its care. The man shouts, pushes her shoulder. She holds the clinker tighter. The pain of it digs into her hands, distracts her from the fear. What's going to happen? So many things have happened. Now she is centre stage. Grandma said she was an actress. I do not need to have the flounce and flair of an actress now. He likes wine and I have no wine. I should sing, I am shaking too badly. I. Smaller and smaller and smaller her soul quavers and searches and cannot find. And the sky is glowering. The world is shrinking, filled with shouting. And where is Grandma? Snap. Where is Grandpa? And where is Mummy? Snap. And where is Daddy? Snap. And when am I going to be away from this man and all these dreadful things? The child clutches the clinker fiercely. Blood. The gun has clicked bulletless 3 times. The man throws the gun, laughs, marches off. A hand drags the child away. You're bleeding, child. What have you done to yourself? The woman opens her hand, reveals the clinker. See? What did I tell you? That clinker from the chimneys is your grandpa and your grandma come to make you safe. You are safe now, child. Breathe, child. Later, another woman asks, why did you lie to her? Because when truth shall not keep her safe, we shall give her lies. It is all we can do. The end.
So Margaret, have you got any stories or experiences?
Yeah, I went on holiday to Anglesey. Because I was going on my own to do some writing, which was fine. I got to this lovely place, beautiful house, lovely weather, nothing scary about it whatsoever. And when I went to bed at night, there was suddenly a loud whooshing sound from the toilet. And I thought, oh, so I got up and flushed it again, thinking I hadn't flushed it properly. Got back into bed and it was silent until I got to bed. Just as I was drifting off again, the whooshing would start up again. And it went on and on like this, and the whooshing and whooshing got louder and louder and continued for days and days. And above the top of the sound of the whooshing, you could just hear a woman's voice, and I thought, I'm just going mad. I'm on here on my own and I'm just going mad. And anyway, I was listening to Emily Sandé, and miraculously, the whooshing and the talking all shut up. So whenever Emily Sandé was on. So I unplugged the machine that played the music and switched it off totally. So there was no way that the music could turn on. And then it did turn on and the noises stopped while whatever it was listened. So I thought this is either an electrical fault or it's something to do with the machine having batteries. Checked all of that. No, it didn't have batteries. It was not connected to anything electrical and it did turn itself on. So I told my friend this story, who says that we should go back and do some research. And guess what? I'm not going. No way. It was scary. Very scary.
Gosh.
That does sound pretty scary, actually.
Yeah, scary or I'm mad, one of the two.
So I'm going to give you a couple of poems. The first one I've read before in public. It's about Stinking Clegg, and this is not the ex-Liberal Democrat leader. This is a ghost who basically was a tramp in about 1900 who was chucked into the Camber and obviously drowned. And he comes back on foggy days and you smell him before you see him, apparently. Stinking Clegg. He will return when the smog descends, when slate skies leach into concrete, buildings dissolve into the peripheral, side roads are a figment of memory, and you are alone, so very alone. This smothering veil of murk will cling to skin like an old dank shroud as pavements seep into nightmare, the whole island muffled silent, your footsteps deadened to nothing. It's the smell that you will notice first, as he glides in from his harbour grave, as a tang of brine clags into rotting flesh of one whose revenge from a violent end is to stalk the living on a night like this. And the other one is a new one. It's called Reckoning. I'm just going to move it up. There we go. Reckoning. How carefully chosen those little stones you scuttled by shape, size, sometimes colour. And so how you carried on, kept moving the beach, one pent-up pebble at a time. There would be a day, you said, when one would reach the horizon. It would all be worth it then. Your effort so expended on all this flailing, one helpless soul at a time. Maybe you should have listened to tide sirens crackle hiss, scooping us up, pushing us back. Now you are so close to water, and we are relentless, and we will not be denied. We have been here before. Thank you.
So, Richard, have you had any paranormal experiences or seen a ghost?
I actually lived in a house that was in a road in Frome, and it was actually the top of the road was where the gibbet was left when from the assizes, because it's in Somerset. But I just slept through. I didn't see anything then. When I was in on holiday in Scotland on the Isle of Skye, myself and my sister were asleep in this. We shared a room. I must have been about 7 or 8, and she was about 10. And we kept hearing footsteps coming into the room, but we were sort of sleeping, half sleeping. And then the next morning we found out that there actually was a ghost that was coming out of the room, apparently. So, but that's about it.
Right. Thank you. Well, I'm going to read some Dark Drabbles. A drabble is a story of exactly 100 words, excluding the title. So the first one is called The Doorstep. I tripped over the doorstep, and as I fell, I was dreading getting another cut that wouldn't heal up, like last time. Instead, I fell through a crack in the pavement to a soot-covered cave below the street. It was full of gargoyles with round eyes on stalks. One exclaimed, "We are still drinking your blood from when you fell before." "But the pharmacy gave me that old-fashioned gentian violet remedy," I said. "Too late to stop us." He seized my hand and sucked it, and the cave roof rose till it burst into the street and cracked the doorstep. This next one is called Piano Wire. The wires behind these piano notes are so thin that they must be made to slice, not to play a tune. I take one out and fashion it into a weapon, and then use it to slice through an apple. Am I practicing before cutting someone, or am I converting it into a cooking utensil, like a sword into a ploughshare. Returning to my piano, I find it now has a dead note. That can do in place of killing something sentient. And during my concert tomorrow night, my fame will be the sacrifice as the audience all boo me. This one is Monster Eyes. Witches can see ghosts, and ghosts can tell if you are a witch. Zombies don't see anyone, but they can smell the blood of the living. Vampires scent blood from a long way away, like sharks, so they do not need to see. The Yeti, being an abominable snowman, is snowblind, while skeletons have dry and empty eye sockets. I suppose it was a waste of time to make that list. Whichever creature I decide to dress up as at the fancy dress party, there is no need for me to go invisible. I might as well let everyone see me. And this one is called The Key. This was written by my muse, who is a kind of nymph-like creature, and I always credit her when she's written something. It turned, but it scraped. The door splintered against the floor. No one in this woodshed except 2 spiders, and no furniture except the treasure chest. Dan lunged forward to grab the heavy box, but as he passed the threshold, a guillotine hurtled down and cut his head off cleanly. The owner of the treasure always used a booby trap when stashing it, and had indicated it on the map by sketching 2 boobs. Pity Dan thought it was a doodle in the margin done by someone who loves the ladies. He only had eyes for the key attached to the map. Thank you.
I really enjoyed those, Linda. Thank you. We've got Sue Harper next. You're muted, Sue.
Yeah, okay. Am I all right?
Yeah.
This is called the Har, and the Har is a mist that only really happens in the north of the country, you know, sort of Scotland, you know, Newcastle around there, and in the summer. It's a summer thing. Okay. I hate Halloween. In some way, for some reason, like Anne, you know, we've got a sort of joint hatred of Halloween. So this is my alternative to Halloween. And the protagonist's me, obviously, although it's Sarah, you know. Sarah was getting excited about the forthcoming Halloween, although in the times of COVID, the sweets and the visits would have to be virtual. So it might not be as much fun as usual. Nevertheless, it would be a full moon on the night itself. And she had visions of witches on broomsticks silhouetted across its silver disc. Black and red will be the colours to wear, of course, and she fished out her lantern and her plastic raven. There must be some dried out spiders somewhere in the house that she could use. Still, the Dark Festival was a couple of weeks away, and she decided to take a walk along the beach. It was clear, crisp weather, and every object seemed preternaturally precise, almost as if it had a black line round it. She thought of Keats' view of autumn, season of mists and mellow fruitfulness. October mists were like fog, the dank air seeping into your lungs. Sarah imagined the darkness as it came rolling in, bringing dread and anxiety in its wake, and the death of the old year. Soon, soon. But then she saw something odd. There was a blindingly white mist coming in from the sea to the land. It seemed crystalline as it rolled in silently, and it conferred tiny icicles onto everything it touched. They melted soon. It was the Ha. The Ha was a summer phenomenon, though. It was caused when warm air passed over the cold North Sea, and it occurred mainly in Scotland. So both the season and the place were out of kilter. Nonetheless, the sea fret, as some called it, was real enough now. The air was laden with droplets. Everything became muffled and indistinct. You could not tell who was who, what was what. Sarah began to feel that this was a far more powerful occurrence than those tired rituals of Halloween. They had become Halloween for her. It had become stale and gestural, but some new magic was drifting from ashore from the Ha, and she ran out to meet it. The white swirls enveloped her. She became brittle almost, and was afraid that if she was careless, a finger or a toe might be knocked off. She was cold, but alive in a new way. As the mist subsided, she realised that she was utterly changed. Other people on the beach had been caught in the Ha too. Like them, Sarah looked as though she were made of ice. But now she possessed the power to make people freeze or melt merely by spreading her hand. This was a fresh witchcraft. And so it was that Halloween ceased to be celebrated, except in tiny backward pockets of the country. The animal symbols of the Ha were not bats or spiders. They were snow leopards, polar bears, and Arctic foxes. White cats replaced black cats as the familiars of choice. The fire and the terror of Halloween was replaced by the aching iciness of the Ha. And its chief celebrants were now Sarah and the others on the beach, the people of the snow. Okay, that's the end.
And Sue, do you have any ghostly experiences at all?
Yes, a whole range of them actually. I mean, my family were completely bonkers, as you know, and very, you know, we all used to love having seances and, you know, going to mediums and God knows what. And my father was very, because he used to be like that, and then he became very cynical about it. And then he had two very vivid experiences which affected him. He heard my aunt, he saw her after she died, and he also saw one of his colleagues just after he died. And it affected him so profoundly that when he was dying, it was them he was talking about, and not us, you know. And I saw my father once on Hilsea Roundabout in a car and chased after him all the way to Southampton on the M27. But I actually think it was the intensity of the desire to see him and have it out with him, you know, tell him off, that produced it. But actually, none of those really matter. The most important experience I had was actually on top of the South Downs once. And it's very similar to Wendy's experience, where I had been meditating for a long time and thought I would try it then. It was right on the top, you could see for miles. There was nobody at all. And so I tried it in that place, and I suddenly felt as if I was out of my body. You know, I was looking down on myself. I could see myself, I could see the landscape. And then I had a very strong sensation of being sort of pushed back with a bump into my body. And I've never had anything like that before or since. I don't know if that's supernatural or what, but it was an interesting experience. Yeah. Thanks.
Very, very good. Yeah. Okay. So you can see I'm dressed for the occasion like Mandy.
Yes.
My story is, I've done it before actually, had another little go at it. It's called Tapiola. So Carl, thank you for joining us today. You know that I am Paavo. To your left is Usko, who is another member of our team. You also know that normally the idea is to have as many as your family present as possible for this therapy. But of course, we have not been able to trace anyone. We feel, however, that shouldn't be a reason for you to be excluded from this psychological treatment. And so by your agreement, the two friends you have made here are present today, Janice Nystrom and Werner Eriksson. As you know, they may speak if they feel you may be straying from the discussion about the difficulties that you are experiencing. This is called open dialogue, and it is a general therapy that was designed here and which is now practiced around the world, in which we listen to whatever comes up for you. The only rule, as you know, is that you must talk and we must listen and keep you focused. So Carl, I would like to invite you to talk to us about the matters that have led you to where you are right now. And you can start wherever you want to. Up to this moment, Carl had gripped his right arm very strongly with his left hand, but now began to relax and release the grip on his arm. Thank you. And thank you for your help that you have given me in being able to do this. To be honest, I have thought about so many different things. Some, as you pointed out, that may have been part of what my mind wants me to say rather than what I want to say. And when I think about what I want to say, I come back to the same night in Jaskalinen. I have no idea when, but it was many years ago. I was coming back from Vikby. Is that Vikby by the Yasmin Lakes? Janice observed. Yes, it is, thank you. For some strange reason, I decided to take the Solf Road rather than the motorway. I guess it would be more relaxing, like going into a sauna with the wonderful mint on the coals and the feeling of warmth when you get... Yes, I always found that road pleasant. It's through the forest, isn't it? Janice offered again. Yes, it is. It is, but I don't know why I did it at night and in a storm and on a road with no lighting. Carl went to grip his arm again. Didn't you want to turn back? Werner said. The harsh sun shining through the skylight diminished quickly as light cloud came over. Everyone adjusted their eyesight, as in the modern medical unit where the meeting was being held. Yes, you know, I think I did, said Carl, suddenly animated, as though he was getting nearer to something. But it was as though I was being compelled, as if I had no control, and someone or something had taken control of my mind. The loud call of a sea eagle could be heard from above, where the skylight was slightly ajar. Can you remember how fast you were driving? Said Usko. Do you know, I can't. The first part of the road is very bendy as it borders the main lake. So I don't think that I was going fast then, but as the road straightens, I remember driving faster. I was listening to Sibelius' Fifth Symphony, the one by Harvey. The symphony had finished and the tone poem Tapiola had started, which for some reason always filled me with unease. But Tapiola is the spirit of the forest in Norse mythology, isn't it? I asked. It is indeed. It is the one time that Sibelius perfected his orchestration to achieve terror. It is very rarely played. People are so afraid of it. The silver urn bubbled away in the background, simultaneously giving an air of both indifference and otherness. You say, Carl, that you are a music critic, am I correct? Paavo asked. Yes, I was one of Finland's finest. I travelled all over the world. And what happened after you increased your speed? Werner asked. I ran out of petrol. Carl said this in such an absurdly natural way that everyone apart from me and Carl smirked. I was livid with Usko, who should have known better. Carl looked me straight in the eye to seek something. It was not funny. The end of the tapiola had reached its terrifying climax. My car had given out ages before it normally would. I lost my phone. I was in the middle of a forest, and worse, I realized that I had stopped in the old abandoned cemetery of Sapati. If I went through the cemetery, it would take me just 2 hours to get back. But if I continued along the road, it would take me nearly 6. Without even thinking, I crossed into the cemetery. Of course, the music of tapiola was going through my mind whilst I was trying to fathom the reason us Finns always buried our dead in woodland. And of course, tapiola is the perfect answer to that very question. I noticed that Carl was now talking. He was no longer talking into his hand as he did normally. He was talking to each of us in turn with direct eye contact. I was initially dubious about today, but give Usko her credit. She pressed me on it, and she was right. What answer, Carl? Usko asked. As to why we still use paganism to bury our dead. As I was walking further into the forest, I remembered a scathing review I wrote in the New York Times, where I compared a conductor's tapiola to being eaten alive by an enormous snake. At first you think, oh, this will be okay, don't panic. I'll just start kicking or something. And then after being rational for about an hour, when your feet and your legs start to burn, you eventually realize that there is nothing you can do. You just have to accept this fate, a slow and agonizing death. Oh, it's a pity you had to listen to that. I bit my lip at the question from Werner, but Carl seemed to appreciate it. Well, I forgot all about it when I fell into the trench. I realized that in the old 12th century part of the cemetery, trenches were dug against the Russian invasion, trenches that opened up the slaughter of whole villages under the papal bull of 1171, Non Parum Animas Noster, or better known as the Northern Crusades of Pope Alexander III against the peaceful pagan culture of the Finns and the Estonians. More than half the populations were wiped out. The heavy patter of rain became audible from the plastic skylight. Did you hurt yourself when you fell? I asked. No, there was mud, water, and other things in the trench. At first it was just the shock of falling. But as I tried to get up, I realized that something had got hold of my arm. Carl once again gripped his arm tightly. The room became quite dark, the rain more intense. And what was worse, the sides of the trench started to move towards me. That's when I saw it. Saw what, Carl? The remains of a woman that dropped on top of me. I couldn't get rid of her. It was as if she was still alive and wanted me to help get her out. I was so frightened. I was actually wailing. She was quite small with long flaxen hair. In the darkness, all I could see was the flaxen hair and the black holes where her eyes should be. Carl strengthened his grip, but I could not release my arm, and the trench sides were now falling on top of us. A flash of lightning briefly illuminated the intensity of Carl's eyes, whilst thunderclaps could be heard in the distance. I was now in total darkness, and intense pain blasted through my right arm and into my whole body. I couldn't breathe, and her skull pressed down on my face. I was pinned down I thought I heard her say something, but it must have been my imagination. I quickly stopped Usko and asked what Carl thought he heard her say, in the confidence that he had offered it, so I couldn't be leading him. At last, or something like that. What happened then? I said, take your time, Carl. I don't remember anymore. I think I must have passed out with the pain. Dull lighting lit the room automatically, showing that Carl had returned to tightly gripping his arm and looking at his open hand. Do you remember anything else? Usko asked. Then I woke up here. At first, I had no idea what happened, but slowly, like a nightmare, it all came back to me. I realized that we were very close to something, and the others realized the same as they looked at me. I slowly said, Carl, could you please let go of your right arm and pull up your sleeve? Without any thought, Carl slowly lifted his sleeve, revealing from the elbow down a darker, thin, bony arm to which was attached a longer, thin hand. The hand Carl couldn't take his eyes off. The fingers were much longer and more slender than those on his other hand. That is very interesting, Carl, I said. The police explained to us that before you passed out that night, you actually shouted something to them in Old Norse. Do you have any recollection of what that was? A thunderbolt exploded just above us with the noise of an enormous splintering crack, followed by radiating light and energy passing across the faces of everyone in the room. It seemed to connect with Carl in some inexplicable way across the landscape of 1,000 years. Yes, I do. It was, go, be gone, leave us alone, leave us. The lights failed. Moments later, the dull reserve supply came on. Carl continued, but it wasn't me. I said nothing, nothing at all. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, right, Paul, have you got a supernatural story for us? You're on mute. Okay, I'll just carry on then and read my story. It's very much edited short story of mine. Okay. She heard him before she saw him. Footsteps echoed on the tarmac, then splashed through the puddles. She hid motionless behind the hoarding surrounding the concrete monolith. There was something curious about his approach. Was he trying to get in? She'd put him right. This was her territory. There must be a way in, a loose board somewhere. He gulped back the bile rising from the knots and twists that wrenched his insides. He had hardly slept since the accident, when, in the blink of an eye, his entire world had fallen apart. A movement alerted him, and he saw a hand emerge from behind a wooden panel. This way, sunshine. She pulled him deftly into the darkness and pushed the hoarding back into place, trapping them both in a world of damp silence. A blackened concrete stairwell rose above them. She gripped his wrist and led him up. He stumbled behind her, his raincoat flapping gently against her bare legs. He realized he would have to trust her. How could he navigate the building's interior without her, even if he had had a hand in its design? Where are you taking me? he asked eventually, after they had climbed countless dank, slippery steps. Up to my place. Your place? Yeah, home from home, so to speak. But I promise you, love, it'll be better than home. Affronted, he glared at her. You think I'm a client? It was funny how certain professions used that expression. Both architects and prostitutes had clients. Aren't you? Am I, he thought, maybe one last time before? It's not the reason I'm here. So what is then? She let go of his wrist. You here to waste my time? No harm in telling her, he supposed. What would she do? Call the police? I'm here to end my life. So there's nothing I can do for you? She raised her eyes to look for his reaction. He shifted uneasily and straightened his tie. Okay. His eyes met hers. She hadn't expected her life to turn out this way. She glanced at the marks on her arms. Brown sugar, Danny had called it. Sounded harmless enough, but there was nothing sweet about losing control over your life. It's up here, she pointed towards another staircase. Yes, I know. You do? I worked on this building. I helped design the flats. Well, I'm the only one living there now. All the fancy lot moved out. She looked up at him and smiled, putting a hand into his this time. Why don't you leave me? See if you remember the way. He held her tightly, and a surge of life flowed through his body, reaching every extremity. He remembered her promise. Would this be better than home? He followed her along a concrete-lined hallway and found himself in a space that drew him back to those heady days of the 1970s. Shagpile carpet still covered every surface of the floor and crept its way over the sunken seating area. He watched as she lit a cigarette, inhaled deeply, and then blew 3 smoke rings into the air. Want one? She offered. No, thanks. Gave up years ago. How about a drink? That would be nice. She brought a bottle and 2 glasses. Black Tower? He tried to conceal his disapproval. That okay? Yes, of course. What could he say? The Liebfraumilch was all the rage when he was younger, but his tastes had refined over the years. She watched him sleeping on the shagpile. He had surprised her. They'd shared a connection that somehow seemed to join the circle. His nostalgia had rekindled her own memories. An overwhelming sense that things must change engulfed her. He opened his eyes and sat up too quickly. Blood rushed to his head. Where was she? He dressed and explored the rest of the flat. It was empty. In the kitchen, their wine glasses sat, upturned on the draining board. 2 empty bottles, neck down in the waste bin. Her body felt worn out, despite the brief ecstasy the stranger had rekindled in her. She knew that the cash she'd given her wouldn't last long, and she'd have to get out there again and expose herself to the abuse and beatings her pimp and many clients dealt out. His head still thumping. He knew he couldn't go through with it, and that was because of the tenderness she'd shown him. He walked out of the flat, down the stairs, and squeezed himself back through the fence panel and into life. Sirens wailed in the distance. He took a deep breath, splashed through the puddles, and headed home. She sheltered in the lee of the stairwell, prepared the syringe, and injected her whole week's supply. Then she heaved her sluggish body onto the parapet that ringed the top of the tower. The wind howled and caught her off balance. She tottered and instinctively reached towards the delicate texture of the concrete slab, her small, dry hands clutching at the air. He knew the pain would never disappear, but he learned to live with it. He busied himself writing a book about the history of brutalism. He discovered some old newspaper clippings, faded and yellow, in the local library. An article described suicides at the building where he had nearly ended it all just a few months earlier. As he read on, his heart began to thump. One suicide, a particularly tragic one, recounted the tale of a prostitute who had lived in one of the flats. She was an addict who had taken her own life by jumping from the top of the car park stairwell. This had happened 25 years ago, and the journalist mentioned she'd recently drunk 2 bottles of Black Tower wine with an unknown guest. The police had found 2 glasses on the draining board and the bottles in the bin. They had tried to trace her companion, but he or she could not be located. The end. Thank you.
Suzanne, anything gone bump in the night for you?
No, hasn't. No. Can I pass on that one?
Yes.
Thanks.
The first poem I'm going to read, I was on holiday some years ago on the Isle of Wight, and just in a pub off of the Carisbrooke Castle called the Castle Inn. And they've got a lot of ghost stories around the place, so I sort of bunged them all together. So each name of this is one of their ghosts. May waits by the fireplace, where she worked in the stable bar, staring at the amber flecks, reminders of her drowned son's eyes, drowned as a baby by the man who took the fares from one-time lovers, who followed May upstairs. William, the landlord, left the maid a 6pence if she'd obliged the sheriff, who turned blind eyes to smuggled wine that kept his cellars full. The ostler mooned with puppy longing, stole secret glances of her slumber, abhorred what evil made her do for shelter when her lover sailed. With the early tide, the bar door clattered. Robin threw pots through windows, slammed chairs, smashed bottles, woke up all and sundry, dragged the maid to the empty hearth and strangled her for faithlessness, then staggered to the cellar, drunk with rumour, drunk with venom. In rage, the ostler followed, crushed Robin's skull with a horseshoe and turned to see the maid, ashen for the father of her child. Anguish took the ostler, hung simply from the stable rafters. The boy came to her years later, anemic, hungry, pleading for some comfort. She soothed his restless spirit. William serves there still, leaving newfangled coins for the women who serve well. And my second poem is, sorry Sue and Anne, it's about Halloween. Pentad. Their bodies were heavy, hauled into my car boot, hefted to the kitchen table, each of 5 swollen brutes, dismembered on marble. Slicing caps at an angle, scooped out ice-cold brain, distended threads of pulp, threshing knife to mangle, gouging innards clean. With serrated blade of metal, I carved scars through the skin, through eyes to piles of gore, scraped canines, jagged jaws. Fingers bore the fleshy stain. Matching caps to heads, I washed off the limpet coal. In the gloom of the shed, a fire in each hollow skull leaked shadows on the wall. I moved them to the garden, a show to freak out children. Checking later in the night, a snail clung to one cheek, peeked into the demon's eye. And thank you. A third poem is going to be published in a magazine called Orwis soon. And it's about a werewolf. Legend. A glabrous moon, closer than usual to Earth, seemingly larger, hung above the South Downs. run in the open air, through mud, wet grass under paw, the dew clustering glass ampules over the ground, chalk powdering the hillside, leaving claw marks in its pale surface, draw of instinct, fat stench of boar, the tiny aroma of rabbit, their quickness flicking through the forest, and something human. A hunter on the trail, poacher after deer, brethren to protect, backtrack his boots to a blood door in a meek street, his woman lonesome in their bed, raid the outbuilding where carcasses hang, heft his body to a steel hook, a present for her breakfast. The shudder of morning, shift to my other skin, bare-breasted, not quite remembering. And what?
Thank you, Sue. Have you anything supernatural and spooky to add to that?
Yeah, and I'm never sure whether it's a trick of the light like a rainbow, but occasionally I'll be talking with a person and see a halo around them, and I've no idea what it might mean or anything like that, but I put it down to poor eyesight and light coming through at a funny angle. But if I turn to talk to somebody else I'm with, they don't have the aura. It happens very rarely though. So.
Don't know.
Yeah. Spooky.
Yes. My offering was inspired by a trip to Portsmouth Castle a couple of years ago. It's called The Owl and the Shapeshifter. The owl left its nest just after dusk and flew past the castle to its branch in the churchyard. It was his usual perch for hunting mice, but tonight he waited, watching but not looking for food. He knew. The moon was full and partially obscured by cloud, but his incredible vision enabled him to watch the foreshadows lengthen. He missed nothing, and he saw it materialise, a grey shape getting darker and forming a human form, hovering over the ground. Shapeshifter, he thought, as it floated through the gravestones, leaving no trace, making no sound. It stopped above the freshly covered grave as if reading the tributes, the flowers already wilting. The church clock struck midnight, each toll dying away slowly. The shape appeared to look directly at the owl and then sank slowly into the grave. The flowers never moved, but the grave pulsed with an eerie grey light. The owl's keen hearing caught a metallic, discordant note, as if knives were being scraped together along their sharp edge. It was in perfect synchronization with the light from the grave. The woman strode through the lich gate, approached the grave, and stopped before it, just as the last stroke of midnight died away. She also looked at the owl, but it did not return her gaze. Rotating its head through 360 degrees, it then gave a single mournful hoot and moved silently along the branch to a darker spot. The glow from the grave was brighter now, but still not lighting the surroundings. The grey shape rose from the grave as silently as it had entered, taking on as it did an emaciated human image. His voice carried easily on the night air. Believe me, they will not like you for this. You're not even in a pentacle. The woman tossed her head. You forget, I know more about the celestial fear than you can possibly imagine. I will deal with the 7th cohort of eternal damnation in due course. Far away, thunder rumbled and flashes lit up the eastern sky. They are coming, said the shape. Have you got it? A thin bony hand gave the woman a piece of flesh. Less than an inch in diameter, an artery protruded from it, blood glowing darkly in the moonlight. complete with blood supply as you requested, taken from the body just as it left for the pearly gates, the only time it takes on a physical form. The woman gazed impassively at it. A human soul, an actual human soul. The thunder was definitely closer, but the woman was ready. With a silent nanosecond flash, she disappeared out of worldly dimensions, beyond time, space, and all its manifestations. The shapeshifter never stood a chance. He and the owl were dealt with before the cohort leader landed. People would speculate for years on how the gravestone had appeared at the head of the grave overnight, but the shapeshifter had to gaze mutely at them, entombed in granite, until the cohort chose to deal with them. The owl was similarly entombed in the tree, unable to hoot or move, but seeing and hearing all. They both gazed at the two figures along the grave. The head of the seventh cohort had chosen to manifest herself as a large black witch, and was surprised to see the Grim Reaper arrive with her, a measure of the seriousness with which they both took the situation. The Reaper spoke first, his voice with its usual perfect tone and diction coming from the black side inside his hood where a head should normally be. He addressed the tombstone, looked beyond it to the tree where the owl was entombed. You will both be punished for your respective parts in this, but first we will deal with this gross and somewhat serious breach of the fabric of the continuum. He turned to the witch. How did you get to hear of this? Would you believe from the Archangel Gabriel earlier today, first time I'd ever spoken to her? No one could see the expression on the Reaper's face, but his gasp said it all. After a short pause, he said, so they knew about it, but couldn't stop it. I've said it before, you should never underestimate these humans. Forever probing, forever curious, they never leave anything alone. They were always going to find a way sooner or later. Where did she go? Probably out of this universe. He paused for a moment. But probably not out of our jurisdiction. I have the whole cohort on it. Keep me posted. I'm sure Gabriel's boss will want to speak to us both about this very shortly. The end. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Do you have a supernatural occurrence that you'd like to share with us?
I can't say as I have, but I think it was Arthur Clarke said that any technology too far advanced of ours will be considered as magic. I think it was Arthur Clarke who said that. And I firmly believe that, but I can't say as as someone said earlier, nothing's gone bump in the night for me, I'm afraid.
Thank you. So I moved to the Philippines with my parents and my sister when I was in 4th grade. And I soon discovered to my delight that the Philippines didn't only have one sort of vampire, it had several. And so this is a story about one of them. It's called the Manananggal. I could look in the mirror and not shriek at my own reflection. This was once upon a time in my life, in a life wrest without pity from my grasp, that I began to forget if it is truly part of my story. I wasn't always this thing of unslaked thirst, this creatures that Lolas told stories of to little ones during summer blackouts, making signs of the cross rapidly in succession as their lips moved, a tale to subdue the boisterousness of innocence. I was more and somehow also less than this nightmare that plagues expectant mothers who slept in terror during the last trimesters of their pregnancy, fearful to wake up the following morning and find themselves barren and bled out, imagining their unborn child now warming my own belly as I licked and groomed around my chops. Yes, I devour your fetus. I need to feed nightly to survive, but the drop of soul that I still retain regrets it. I was once among the living. I bled. I laughed. I loved too much. I loved so much that if I squeezed my eyelids tightly, I remember my beloved. I remember how our eyes met and knew. I remember how ardently he wooed me. I remember how I was consumed, crazy with my longing to taste him on our wedding night. If I stay still a moment longer, I may even remember my own womb, when it began stirring, concocting a seedling out of nothing, our own sweet child. What I cannot seem to carve out of my brain is how fiercely I love this unborn offspring without ever seeing his face, and how, with the simple act of my unmarred slumber, my beloved, my baby, the only things that mattered to me were both spirited away from me forever. I suppose I was worth mourning over too, for though my unholy maker took an unserendipitous fancy to me, taking my measure in her one mighty gulp and rebirthing me into this unlife, I was lost to those who loved me, who grieved the loss of me and my family, who grieved my tender life cut short. Yes, I am a wraith as wretched as your imagination can conjure up, perhaps all the more horrific for the deception of shining beauty in matrimony with features grotesque. Upon first glance, I am mere maiden, virginal and reticent, pale and ethereal as the moonlight that is now my daytime. You art first enchanted, drawn into my ephemeral spell. It is only until you are within reach and it's too late that my proboscis is all that fills your sight as it pierces your bubble abdomen and robs you of your viscera. I am not an unkind fiend. I feel the sorrow of your passing. I weep luha at abo, tears mingled in the char, as I gently lay you in your sleeping chamber upon your waiting banig. As you eagerly welcome your demise, you muse at how my torso that cradles you in the throes of death has divested itself of its lower limb. You are lightheaded as you wave goodbye, laughing out loud at the absurdity of it. My corpse legs, waiting like patience and virtue in its dark corner. Yes, it's true that if you can halt the rejoining of my divided body with a poultice of garlic and ashes before dawn heralds her rosy approach, that I will perish as the glorious sunlight touches each bereft half. I wish for this constantly. Day following agonizing day, I call out nightly to a deity, long deaf to my prayers. I am impatient for the reaper to at long last take me along on his nightly course. I was once a maiden. I was once a mother too. I was once the laughing morning itself. Thank you.
Hello? Hello?
Hello, Alex. Welcome.
Hi. I've got asked to read.
Alex, turn your camera
Can you hear me?
Have you got a camera?
Yeah, it should be on. Can you not see it?
No, we can hear you though.
That's weird.
Oh, that's better. Oh.
Can you see me now?
It disappeared again.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. So I just popped in and I've got a very short story. It's called The Swan. Once upon a time, there lived a giant swan, so large no lake or pond could house him, so he went to live on the sea. He sailed the oceans, never coming close to the land for fear of mankind and their kings and queens. For kings and queens ate swan, their meat reserved for the royal palate. Stories by deep-sea fishermen of a mighty swan filled the coastal taverns. One night at the Greg Hammer, two fishermen are heard talking. A swan, a mile from our boat, out on the sea, as big as a cloud. A what? Exclaimed Lester, looking up from his bitter. Lester had an ear for such things due to a high level of anxiety. He was a reporter for the Squeaky Recorder. Not a good paper, more a bad idea. The pub fell silent. The fisherman, obviously shaken, stared back at Lester with weary yellow eyes. Go on, Pete, said one. Tell him. It was a swan, lad, as tall as this house, I tell ye. Me and Harris saw it from our trawler. Its wake almost turned our boat. Bosun Jim said he saw it too a year ago. Lester moved to their table, producing a small notepad and pencil as he went. They talked late into the evening. 2 days later, the story made the evening edition, complete with drawings. Then the national news a week later. Fleet Street journalists lined the south coast. Some chartered boats, eager for that first picture, but the swan was never seen. Till one day he is off Brighton Pier. An excited crowd gathered to watch. Some began to swim, wanting to touch his blinding white plumage in the midday sun. The swan stayed motionless with huge black eyes that gave no light. A fanciful ship from the heavens, he stood 50 foot tall with a neck like a furnace chimney, his beak like an upturned boat. One swimming man, now 4 or 5 meters from the beast, was suddenly gobbled up to the horror of the crowd. His writhing body could be seen slowly making the drop down the long neck. Now, with a taste for human flesh, the swan began its terrible insurgence as a slow, jaunty meander up country to Buckingham Palace, eating as it went, stopping to drink the boating lake at Green Park, before smashing the kitchens at the palace and gobbling up the cook. Then into the hall, its long neck breaking Fabergé eggs and a 17th century dresser, up through the oak ceiling and into the Queen's bedroom. Philip is trying to load an antique revolver, but drops it, his hands shaking uncontrollably. The Queen, dressed complete with purse and hat, begins to apologize for past indiscretions, Andrew, and the swans she has known. The swan opens its mouth above the Queen, but stops short of eating her, and like that, he is gone. Thank you. It's a short horror story. I hope you got it all.
That's great. That's great, Alex. Thank you.
That's available on YouTube if you want to see it with animation.
Brilliant.
It would make more. It kind of makes more sense, I guess, if you see the animations. But thank you for having me.
You are most welcome. Do you have any personal stories of the supernatural you'd like to share?
I was thinking about this. I don't really. But I'm currently living in a house that apparently is haunted, but I haven't seen anything
as yet.
As yet, but I'll let you know. Apparently there's a spectral lady who walks the corridor. A person who used to live here told me that. But she's a friendly ghost, apparently.
Good to
know.
No,
I've never really experienced anything supernatural. Although I'll tell you one thing I did see is I was staying in the woods once, and there was a campfire. And when we cleared the campfire after a few nights out, I swear to, when we cleared this campfire, this toad appeared. Just where the hot embers were, there was a toad, and toads are supposedly, a messenger from the devil. This toad appeared, and I always found that very odd because it was right where this fire was. You would think it would be too hot, but this toad was just sitting where this fire once was, only like half an hour before. was very strange and seemingly unscathed by the fire. And I thought, well, you know, a few hundred years ago, we might have interpreted that as a messenger from some omnipotent force or underworld or something. So yeah, it was that was a strange thing that happened. But I've often wondered about that particular moment.
It sounds very strange indeed. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I'm conscious that we've missed a couple of people out for their stories if they wanted to share them. So I'm going to come first to Linda Hilborn. You didn't get to share a story. Would you like to, Linda?
Well, I've never actually seen a ghost. I mean, I think of myself as mediumistic, but that's more like hearing than seeing. But my dad has seen a ghost, so I don't know if anyone wants to hear the story of my dad seeing a ghost. He used to work in a jeweler's shop, and he went one day down to the basement. It was very dark down there, and there was just some old furniture and a mirror. And as he was passing by the mirror, he saw a maid in there wearing a maid's uniform. And he jumped and he looked towards her, and she'd gone. So when he came back upstairs, he had a word with his colleague, Brian, who had been working in the shop a lot longer than he had. And he said, "Brian, I think I've just seen a ghost." And Brian said to him, "Oh, do you mean the maid? Other people have seen her as well down in the basement." So he felt that he'd had proof that he'd seen a ghost.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing that with us, Linda. Tricia, we didn't hear a ghost story from you either, or anything supernatural, or potentially supernatural, whether you believed in it or not. But after you've possibly shared something like that with us, perhaps you could also tell us about the information you've put in the chat, because not everybody will probably see it there, so you can talk to it as well, if you wouldn't mind. But do you have a story?
I have a tiny story. When we moved to the Philippines when I was younger, we didn't have a house yet built in our family compound, so we had to stay at my aunt's house. In the Philippines, there's a lot of mosquitoes. It's humid, it's hot. So at nighttime, you have to put up mosquito nets. So each mosquito net fit 4 people. We slept on the floor on mats and then mosquito nets. And so I was beside my sister. It was the middle of the night. Incredibly hot, so I went up. I got up to get a drink of water, and in the corner, I thought this was really odd. There was an old woman combing her hair, and I thought the first thought that crossed my mind was, this is unusual time for you to be combing, your long hair. But I said, okay, maybe it's my aunt. She has long salt and pepper hair up to her waist. And I said, I didn't think anything of it. And I didn't try to engage her because, I was a little girl. I didn't know her very well. I was shy. Went to the kitchen, hunted around in the dark for a little glass to drink water with. Come morning time, everybody was awake for breakfast time. I brought it up to my family at the breakfast table. I said, looks like Auntie was in the, combing her hair in the middle of the night. I don't remember seeing her, going out and going through the whole elaborate business of washing it before combing it out. That's what she usually does. And she said, well, child, that's really weird because I wouldn't have bathed or been dressing my hair in the middle of the night. Can you tell me more about it? And so I described the woman, how she looked like, her features. And my aunt just turned pale and she said, you just described your paternal grandmother who passed away, but she never really got to sufficiently see me and my sister. So she said, that's her visiting you. She wanted to see how you guys look like. So that was, that freaked me out afterwards. But in the moment seeing it seemed completely natural. And then The thing is that confirmed it is that she appeared again. That same woman appeared again years later when I came back to stay in the Philippines for vacation and brought my own son. That same woman was hovering over our mosquito net. So that was my son's great grandmother. Yeah.
Wow.
And so every week I have on Thursday nights, Pacific Daylight Time, Pacific Standard Time, here in California, I have an open mic that occurs online. And it is available, the information is available either through my Instagram account, or you can get tickets, free tickets through Eventbrite. And so that link is for the upcoming one this Thursday. And what it's doing is the whole theme is honoring Armistice Day. So it will be poems, music, stories about Armistice Day.
Thank you very much, Tricia.
You're welcome.
Right, so on that note, we're going to take a break, and I'm suggesting we make it just a 10-minute break until 9 o'clock, and then we'll reconvene for the second half. So a comfort break, or time to go and make yourself a cuppa or pour another glass of something, and we'll see you back here at 9 o'clock. If you do want to just hang around on screen and chat amongst yourselves, that's fine too. Yeah, if you are leaving, make sure you're kind of moving on mute, so that we're not distracted by the clattering in the background. And I'll try and remember to do the same. I'm conscious that we've got some additional people here. So we've got Bonnie and Chris, and there was Britta here. I'm not sure if she's still with us at the moment, but Bonnie and Chris might want to join us for open mic slots after the break. They are approximately 4-minute slots. If you have anything that you'd like to share, then just let us know. Thank you.
Hi Eileen, how you doing?
Hi, all right. Have you cut your hair?
No, it was just in a...
Oh!
I
can never get mine to keep tidily back if I tie it back, so...
Yeah, there's a lot of spray, otherwise it's a bit fuzzy.
Yeah. I took up your challenge. I don't know if anybody else did. So my story tonight is sort of loosely around the challenge that you did about writing in the voice of somebody else.
Brilliant.
It's
I didn't tackle it. So,
it's only very loosely because it was harder than I thought. So that I do like a challenge.
Yeah, I'm sure something wonderful has come out of it.
It's not ghostly or anything, but I thought, I'll have a go at that. Yeah. So you've got another poem about to be published.
Yeah, the editor was a bit vague about which edition she'd put it into. I guess it depends the range of other poems that come in.
Yeah.
So it'll either be out in, I think, December or March.
Yeah. Excellent. Good. And are copies of your play still selling?
They're trickling out of the... I've sort of sold about half of the ones I had printed.
Oh.
And the plan, I'm doing another reading with Winchester Muse on the 9th of November, so that might release a few more.
Yeah.
But
is that on Zoom?
It
Is
will
that
be,
Zoom as well?
yeah. No one wants to meet up, let alone.
No, especially now.
We usually meet in the Winchester Discovery Centre.
Yeah, did go there a couple of times with Maggie, a long time ago now.
Yeah.
It's a lovely setting. It's just a long way for me to go in the evening, really. And I always
It's just that we'd have to wear masks and be sat 2 meters apart. So assuming anyone would turn up to be there.
Yeah, that is such a nice setting there. I always get very inspired by the embroidery on the back wall. Yeah, I really, really like that. Yeah, no, I don't think anybody's going to be going there anywhere much, are they, really?
Nope.
But,
so, Zoomaroonies.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not really the same thing, though, is it? You know.
No. It's really difficult to do hand sales.
Yeah.
Ooh, fancy one of those.
Yeah. It's not a good time, is it, for to try to be selling things, really. I think of Christine Lawrence and all her when she's written a book and she has stuff all over, everywhere you go, she's popping up with her books, and she's so good at doing that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And no opportunity now. So
nope. So thank you for everybody that did buy one. Yay!
Yeah. I'm sure eventually they will go.
Yeah, I mean, get into a room for a reading. I'll take a couple along.
Yeah.
And gradually they will filter out.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. They're excellent. They're very, what I like about them, you can pick them up at any point in the book and pick one and read it. And then you find yourself carrying on reading and reading.
Even better.
Really good, yes. Right, I'm just going out of the room for a second. Have I still got? Yes, 4 minutes.
Some people may not realise that looking at us in Richard's screen is Chris Collier.
I thought it was a ninja.
But otherwise known as Chris. But
otherwise known as the mildly content Reaper. Well, compared with Richard, he's very antisocial sometimes.
You're not calling him grim, are you, Chris?
I couldn't possibly say. Maybe grumpy.
So how are people doing anyway?
Well, bored. Very bored with not being able to get out enough, really. But apart from that, fine. Yeah.
You're not entertained by the invitations from American servicemen then?
No, I haven't had that particular one, but plenty just quite like him, actually. Yeah. My reaction's exactly the same as yours. No, thank you.
Oh, goodness. Jackie, you get them sometimes as well, I think, don't you?
Not very often now, no. I used to.
I haven't for quite a long time, and they've just started again. There've been maybe 3 in the last month, but they used to come in fast and furious at one point.
I used to get a lot of emails to my Hotmail account offering me access to local sluts, which was quite a regular thing.
Really?
So I never took it up.
No?
No.
It could have been research for a book, Jackie.
I'm not sure I want to write that particular book.
Very wise, I think, Jackie. Yeah.
Oh dear.
I just didn't use the space bar when I was.
Oh right, I forgot you can do that.
Yeah, it's easier.
That's clever. Is Mandy there?
I am, yes.
Mandy, how many people have we got? How many open micers have we got left? Just want to have some idea.
We've got nobody listed, but
Right.
I'm going to come back to Bonnie and Chris. So Chris down in Dorset, because I know that Chris is a poet and he may have something that he would like to share with us.
He might answer you. He may suddenly be disconnected. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Just trying to contact a few people. Just say.
Linda, I'm sorry if I didn't introduce I didn't ask you. I should have done, about your story.
Oh, that's all right. I was just about to say to you, Sue, you're supposed to ask me for a story, but then I thought, I better not say that.
When we were at the beginning, and I wasn't used to the idea of asking the person before. I was going to ask the person after. It's just me being cloth-head.
Oh, that's all right.
It's fine, guys, because I just built it into contingency plans.
Yeah.
These catch-up points, so it's absolutely fine.
Well, everybody's got in anyway, so that's all right. We've still got no central heating.
Oh, no. How long have you got to wait for it, Sue?
About another fortnight.
A fortnight?
Yeah, not too bad,
Well, hopefully it won't turn really cold.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've got wood fires, and I've not in my room obviously, but I've got electric fire, so it's not too bad. But if it went on after Christmas, I wouldn't be very pleased.
No, exactly. So you don't want it when it gets the really cold part of the year.
Right.
You managed to join us all right, David? You've got to do your unmute at the top.
Yes, I managed it this afternoon.
Yeah, good.
There wasn't too much swearing with it, so I managed to get through.
Excellent. You'll have to tell me how you do the background.
Well, that's fairly easy. Glasses. Down the bottom of the screen, stop video, there's a little arrow.
Is this on iPad?
This is on the laptop.
Oh, I'm on iPad. Perhaps I can't do it.
I'll pass it to somebody more knowledgeable on an iPad. I don't know. I only know these things because my son tells me.
I've got a son like that, but I don't see him very often.
No, we don't. But he sorted my computer out remotely a couple of weeks ago.
Wow.
Phoned me up and I gave him some numbers, and suddenly the mouse started moving on its own. And off. And he said, "Right, it's all fixed, Dad, now."
Wow.
Muttered something about "you owe me a beer" or something. I never heard that.
Is that the share screen one?
Genius, isn't it?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Is that
that's genius, isn't it? Fixing it remotely.
Oh,
but I've heard that if you have a free Zoom, you don't get very good backgrounds. Like you might not be able to see your face as distinct from the background. It might get all mixed in with the background if you've only got a free Zoom.
I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know.
We'll let you, if you freeze, we'll let you know. You'll become part of the Northern Lights.
And there's a story in that, for sure.
Yes. Yeah. I went to about 5 days in Iceland to see them, and if I'm honest, all I saw was a rather vague green blob, which really, I was rather disappointed, because add that to the fact that the beer was £10 a pint. I was not amused.
Okay, I think we probably need to get going again shortly. So I'm not sure if Bonnie's back in the room with us and can hear. there's the offer there, Bonnie, if you are, for you to do a reading, and also an offer to Chris. So, Richard.
Just want to add, if you could keep a look at, there might be 1 or 2 people trying to get in around soon. Kate, possibly.
They don't need to be let in, they'll just come straight in.
Oh, do they? Oh, excellent. Great. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Mandy, thought you had to look out for them. Thank you.
Like me.
Would you like to share something with us, Chris?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, just yeah, I've been taken by surprise, but I do have something here. It will last about a minute. Shall I read it?
Yes.
Okay, it's called Unseen Voices, and this is it. I stood by the fountain. Leaves fell from the trees. The air was still. All I heard was a sound of water. From far off, the voices from those who were unseen.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And Bonnie? No response from Bonnie. So we'll go straight then. Well, first of all, maybe to ask Chris, do you have any supernatural stories or anything like that that you would like to share with us?
Unmute yourself there, Chris.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, Anne has a friend called Moira. They both went to the convent school together, and Moira's husband Pete had a car which he always described in tip-top condition, and they drove to a sort of country house in Sussex which had been abandoned, and he saw a shape at the window, and they so terrified them that they drove off. And later on, he'd have dreams where he would see the same shape in the window of his bedroom and so on. He'd wake up convinced that he could see the face pressed against the glass. That's all I can say, really.
Gosh. Thank you. So Richard.
Yes, Mandy?
Sorry, guys, can I just interrupt? I'm really sorry about this, but we're worried that by the time we come on, there might be a grocery delivery arriving at my place, because it was literally the only slot for days and days and days. It's supposed to be at 10. It could be between 10 and...
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, I was just kind of agonising with Ollie. I mean, if you don't mind us being interrupted, or maybe we could just cut it short, but...
Fry.
Don't know. We could just see how it goes. I'm just thinking with the extra stories, I think we're going to go on beyond 10.
I don't think you're going to be on after 10.
Really? Oh, okay. We thought we might be. Fine. All right. I'll trust you on that then. Cool.
Okay. So actually, it's if it looks like that, but when we get to quarter 2, Tom, we'll put you on at that point if you haven't been, or if you're not the next up anyway, if that makes sense.
Thanks. Sorry to be a pain. I know that's, enough other stuff to be focusing on right now, but...
Right. Okay, so I'm aware that Britta is back with us. Britta, did you want to do any open mic? No. Okay.
No, I'm just a fan of Alex, basically.
Righty-ho. Okay. Well, thanks for joining us anyway.
That's not an excuse.
I know, but I wasn't prepared. I just thought
Read something.
go in this meeting now and listen.
Okay.
Read something. Read something.
So no, you don't have to, Britta. You are welcome anyway. So we're going to go to Sue Lee Good then. Thank you.
Right, got a very, very dull title. It's called Coming Home. I walk into the darkness away from the house. I can't think of it as home. The only home I had with you was in Brompton Road, when I was still grateful to you for marrying me. How could I have ever been that? But life was different back in the 50s. Then, without you, I was destined to be the disfigured maiden aunt living alone with her cats. For a few months, I was happy with you. You introduced me to such a different way of life. Bohemian, you called it. You had become a famous artist, was your favourite saying. But the only painting you did was at work, decorating other people's houses. We had 2 babies in quick succession. They cried a lot. Spoilt your creativity, you said, so you decide to move us to London, still chasing that elusive dream. Dreams don't pay the bills, but that didn't worry you. You exchanged our 3-bedroom terrace for a 2-bedroom damp, rat-infested dump. What did you do? Slapped a load of green paint on the wall and called it a mural, supposed to make me feel as if I was looking through an open window onto a woodland glade. But all I saw was a tangle of brambles, which seemed to grow longer each day, making me feel ever more trapped. How angry you became. Told me I was changing into someone you didn't understand, that you thought you no longer knew me, that I should remember how once I was so grateful to you, that every time I looked in the mirror should be a reminder of that. The children occupied all my time, so much so that at first I didn't take much notice of your new hobby of being a Bunch and Judy man. Hour after hour you spent carving the puppets and had me making the clothes for them. Every night you sat in bed practicing the voice. How I wished you would choke on that stupid widget thing you used to emulate the sound. I took to sleeping on the settee, away from the voice, away from you. Eventually the kids were at school. I found work as a cleaner. I hid my earnings. You were too busy carving to notice. As my savings were grown, so were the number of puppets you were carving. You began storing them in boxes and stacking them in the sitting room. Haven't you got enough puppets? I asked one evening, but you're oblivious to me. As usual, you just kept carving. Every night you still practiced that stupid voice. Every night I slept on the settee. The piles of boxes kept increasing. Our sitting room was crammed to the ceiling with them. I dare not complain. You seemed to be obsessed. It was as if you were becoming Punch and I was Judy. Would hitting me come next? One night, as once again I was wondering what I could do, all the boxes seemed to spring open and all these puppets tumbled out. More and more till every box was empty. The puppets seemed to be alive, chattering to each other in a way of speaking which seemed similar to my lisp. Then they all converged on me, coming ever closer. I tried to scream, to move away, but I felt frozen to the spot. One of them was near my face. I then realized that they were not Punch and Judy puppets, but were replicas of me, of my hare lip, of my squat nose. Suddenly I heard you say in that stupid voice, "That's the way to do it." For a moment, they all stopped moving. Then with a rush, they left the room. I heard a horrible gurgling sound and then silence. The puppets returned to the sitting room and climbed back into the boxes. Next morning, I was sure it had been a bad dream. All the boxes were as had they'd always been. As usual, I took you your early morning cuppa. You were sitting in bed, your eyes staring into nothing. Our Punch and Judy still in your lifeless hands. Choking while practicing the voice was the verdict. For weeks I filled the dustbins with boxes. Now the flat is clear of them. This morning I counted my hidden savings. Brompton Road, here I come.
Brilliant, Sue. Well done. Well done.
Well done, Sue. So have you got any supernatural things you'd like to tell us about?
Yeah, Ada that shared our house with us for about 50 years. None of us have seen her, but we've all felt that she's here on occasion. She first appeared, I suppose, don't know, my second daughter was 2 or 3 weeks old, and I felt her at the bottom of the stairs. Oh, several weeks she was at the bottom of the stairs every evening. Just knew she was there and enjoyed having a family, I felt. Then she was gone, never felt her. So sort of, jokingly I said to my husband, here, and he said, oh yeah, I know. He said, I felt her too. I told her to go away. I thought, oh, something to it. And just silly little odd things happen, and we just got used to it and never mentioned it in front of the girls until they were bigger. And I don't know, one day we attributed something to her. And my second daughter said, oh, you're talking about the old lady that comes in my bedroom? What are you talking about, Oh, she said every night. She said, never seen her, but this old lady comes in. I said, you've never said anything. No, she said, thought it was what children had, was old ladies coming in their room. And even now, yesterday I was looking for a necklace that this daughter gave me. Couldn't find it. Searched the bedroom, searched everywhere. Later on, it's hanging there. This morning, my clock is 2.5 hours slow. I think, oh, the battery's gone, but I'll reset it to make sure. When I checked it at 7 o'clock, it was still keeping time. Yeah, silly, just little things like that. And you think, and we just say, oh, is Ada up to it again? Go away, Ada. And that's it.
I'm going to say that sounds quite comforting in a way.
Yeah, because she's the first I felt that she was saying, I'm so, we call her Ada because there was a lady who lived here on her own before her, and we just attributed her to her. But I first had this feeling that she was so glad that there was a family in this house. It's just this silly, just this feeling, and that's all.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Right, folks, what I brought, or I've got to read tonight, is a revised version of something that I actually read at one of the events probably a couple of years ago. So some of you will recognise some of this, others of you probably won't have heard it at all, particularly the new people that we've got with us tonight. It's called The Collector. I hadn't known Nicholas long before he showed me his private room, a room the great sleuth Sherlock Holmes would have felt at home in. At first, I thought it amusing, though perhaps a little odd, that Nicholas insisted we dress the part, he right down to the deer stalker hat. But he seemed like a nice enough guy, and besides, who doesn't have the odd quirk or two? In the beginning, I would sit by the open fire while Nicholas paced, reading aloud the adventures of Holmes, from first edition books taken from the locked glass cabinet dominating the corner of the room. That was before Nicholas started collecting, before I realised I was the first of his collection, the first inhabitant of his 221B Baker Street. The open fire stifles the room, the mantel cloth rising like a bird coasting on thermals. The black lacquered clock ticks away the minutes of my life. I sit at a chenille cloth covered table. My hat, secured with a pearl-ended pin, makes my head itch. Sweat gathers beneath my corset. Black lace gloves squeeze my fingers. Leather boots pinch my feet. My back aches, my head aches, my heart flutters like a bird trapped in a cage. I dare not move. I am not alone at the table. My companions, all carefully chosen for their foul deeds, sit quietly. I try not to look at them. Look instead at the detailed pictures of anatomy on the walls. But my eyes are always drawn back to their unblinking stares. I tell myself I have fared better than they. I hear a gull screeching, the sound fading as it departs, and I long to follow it, to be far, far away from Mrs. Burnstone, who murdered her employer, Madame Fournay, who killed her husband in a fit of rage, Lady Mary Brackenstall, who refused to name the killer of her brutal husband. We are captive in a complete replica of a Victorian sitting room, save for the embalming table, hidden behind a black lacquered screen depicting brightly coloured birds. They do little to detract from the horrors that take place behind it. Earlier today, Nicholas, aided by his brother Lawrence, brought a vagrant, worse for drink or substance, to this room. The poor man, his chin lolling against his chest, was dragged in and placed on the embalming table. I bathed and groomed this unfortunate, his stench a miasma in the room. Under Nicholas's guidance, I inserted a tube attached to a pump into the crook of the man's arm, allowing the blood to drain from his veins and formaldehyde to swell his arteries. It appears painless, for the man did not flinch, not even when I took my sewing kit and with neat invisible stitches sealed his lips and secured the closure of his eyelids, after which I applied cosmetics, ensuring a natural complexion such as a man of refinement would have. Then I carefully drew in his eyes, this time feeling I'd surpassed myself in creating the naturalness of them. Nicholas tells me he is none other than Sir Robert Norberton, who almost whipped a moneylender to death. Whilst Nicholas arranges him at the table, he bids me pour tea for the ladies, lest I appear inhospitable. You must think me quite mad, but you would be wrong. You see, it comes down to them or me. So I pander to Nicholas's insanity, watch and listen to all he teaches me, and in time I shall surpass him. Then he will join the company he has been so keen to sit at my table, and I shall soar free like a bird on the wing. The end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue. Great. Do you have any tales to tell?
There was only one that I could think of. When we first, we bought this house from an elderly lady who lived here, but she'd actually gone into a home. And it was in a bit of a state, so we spent a fair amount of time renovating it before we moved in. When we moved in and, you know, the place was livable, I'd been in the kitchen and I went into the lounge, and on the settee, there was a black cat curled up asleep. And I sort of did a double take because we didn't have any cats. But when I looked again, there was no cat. Now this happened to me 2 or 3 times.
And I thought, well, you know, it's got to be a trick of the light or something, you know, it's got to be shade, and I'm just sort of superimposing, you know, a cat into this particular shape. And then this particular day, a friend of mine came round, and I was in the kitchen pouring out a couple of glasses of wine, and she'd gone into the lounge, and she came out, and well, she called out and she said to me, "You never told me that you've got a cat." And I went into the lounge and I said, "I haven't." And she said, "I could have sworn I saw a cat on your settee." And I said, "No, we don't have any cats." I said, "But funny you should say that. I have seen, or thought that I've seen, a cat, you know, 2 or 3 times. But from that day on, I never ever saw it again. Not at all. It was really weird. So whether there was a cat, and I never found out whether the elderly lady perhaps had a cat that had died or something, but I just found it strange that we only ever saw it or started to see it once the place was done up and habitable again. But anyway, after that day, I never saw it again. So there we go.
Good one. Thank you. I'm going to do 2 pieces, and the first is a poem that I'm going to do with my friend Chris here, who's suitably dressed, I think. We've been rehearsing for weeks. Well, no, we haven't. This poem is the serious, more serious part of my, you know me, and can't do humour particularly, but this is something I did post up recently, and I wrote it on VJ Day this year, not too long ago, victory in Japan, and I get quite distressed with events like that, and I suppose in the sense this poem represents the many ghosts and the many lost souls in conflict, particularly in the Asia Pacific conflict during the last World War, and it has a personal part to it as well, as you'll find out. But it's a reflection on that day. VJ Day 1988. He was sat in the small garden of the sheltered house. The carer had made us mugs of tea. A time-blown twig of a man who only partly made it home from Changi's hell. It seemed he might snap and tumble away as all his comrades had done. Some fragments of his life force rested with them in undiscovered pits. He stared into the middle distance, but focused for a moment or two on the granddaughter placed in his trembling arms. The soft infant skin and the leathered hands were briefly one that summer afternoon. And somewhere in a Nagasaki suburb, a dying father held his newborn child as his tomorrows slipped away, consumed by the destroyer of worlds. Thank you. Thanks, Chris. And this next piece is a piece of prose, and I genuinely attempted humour, but completely failed, and ended up with about as dark as anything I could write, I think, ultimately. But it's okay. I'm all right. But if you see behind me, just under the clock, there's an image I put up, which I'm going to attempt to screen share very briefly because it's a bit scary for some. It's a drawing I did about 30 years ago doing some group therapy, and it's about recognition of something that I was, the monster, the thing of my recurring nightmares as a child, the beast in me. But you can tell it's going to be real fun, this. I'm going to try and share this. Can I share it? I've forgotten how to do it, Mandy.
It says share screen.
Okay, share screen. Yeah, no. I might have to give up on this one.
Just above there, yeah. Along there somewhere. That's it.
Oh yeah, oh there we go. So I don't know if you can see that, folks. I can't see it, but maybe you can.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, all right. Well, this appears in this next piece. I'm going to try and come out of it now, I think. I'm pressing all the wrong buttons, and this is taking much too long. Sorry about that. I've got to unshare screen, I guess, haven't I? I've forgotten how to do that, Mandy.
If you go to the top, you'll find that it'll pop up and say stop. That's it.
Are we okay now? How are we doing? Are we back?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. It is what it is. He shifted uneasily in his seat when he heard the landlady's chilling words drift across the bar. It is what it is. He attempted the blank stare of De Niro's Irishman. Behind the impassive mask, metaphoric only, he scanned the lounge for the hapless Pacino whose time was up. Who would be next, he wondered. Let it not be me, he breathed into his diminishing pint of Langham's mild. He slipped quietly out as the unnerving, gatling laughter rattle of the barfly regulars rose to a crescendo. No late sun penetrated the sky cast of nimbus grey sweeping in from the Atlantic. He urged his leaden legs and labouring lungs to bear him the 200 yards to the sanctuary of his front door. The council had not yet replaced the sulphur neon streetlights by the melatonin-destroying LEDs, so the gloom was barely dispelled as they flickered from red to yellow. Even the tabby, sauntering along the low forecourt wall, was cloaked in a ghostly pallor. His hearing aid had given up an hour ago, but he saw the cat's mouth open and fancied he heard through feline purrs the delayed echo of the landlady's voice. It is what it is. Now his guts were churning, the unforgiving prostate strangling his bladder, lungs in a vice grip, legs buckling, couldn't tell the difference between dark and leaf-fallen dog shit. He had a momentary anxiety for the emergency service crew, who would have to scoop the mess of him from the pavement were he to lose all control in his last few seconds of consciousness. He watched the cat slink under a white Mercedes as he leaned against a wall, gulping vainly a few more lungfuls of nitrogen dioxide-tainted Pompey air. He reached the corner of his street as the sound of footfall behind him penetrated the ever-present tinnitus ring. A few more steps. Fumbling the key. Pitching through the door, he realized as the lurid hall carpet rose to meet him. There was no footstep behind him. No threat from the implacable world out there. The only menace that had followed him all his days was the disowned shadow buried deep within. The running was over. It is what it is, was his last thought, as an image of his daughter, his only joy, diminished to a vanishing point, and blackness engulfed him. Thank you. You're up next, Anne. You're muted at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I couldn't find myself on the screen.
Okay.
Richard, do you have any personal stories, supernatural stories that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, well, there's just one from many years ago when I was foolish and younger. Well, I'm not saying I'm not foolish now, but I used to, with some friends, indulge in seances. And one night we had an interesting character who I think he named himself as, I'm not sure if this was another tale, but I think this was Frank Borman, cheery chap. But one of the things, tricks he showed us, we wanted evidence that he was actually there. And we put a pack of cards on the table and said, if you are supernatural, you can tell us what the next card is. And he told us 6 of spades, and we turned the card over and it was wrong. I said, well, no, you're wrong. Try again. So give him another chance. Then he said the 5 of diamonds, and well, I'm just making up the actual cards, but and we turned it over, and it wasn't the 5 of diamonds, but it was the 6 of spades. And we then kept asking questions, and he was always naming the card that followed the one we turned over. But then we realized what we were asking him for was the next card, and he was giving us the next card. And I think this happened about 4 or 5 times before we got too freaked out and decided to stop and have a beer.
I don't know if you guys are interested in the only...
Oh, Chris.
The only one that's occurred to me is having been working with my well, dear friend, late friend now, Aki, in a music studio in Potsdam. And we were sat in front of this huge mixing desk, probably 36 tracks, something like that, at least, channels, and chatting away. And I was aware of the cat jumping up behind me and then just jumping off again. And then I asked him, you don't normally have a studio cat, do you? And he said, I haven't got a studio cat. I said, well, I felt it just jumped up. It was the exact weight of a cat. It was just behind me, and then it jumped off again. So I've never brought a cat into the studio. It wouldn't be a sensible thing to do. So that's the ghost cat of Potsdam.
Another cat story.
Yeah. I was inspired by Susan's story.
Yeah.
Cheers, Anne.
Okay, so my story is called The Visit. Nell's dark hair stuck up like palm fronds. Her slender hands curled around her mug of tea, a stronger brew than Ed had used to make. She wore his favourite striped pyjamas with the saggy elastic that had slipped down so easily on lazy Saturday mornings. But now Goldie was on the bed, and the number of hairs on the duvet suggested he slept there. The room was familiar, yet strange, like a childhood haunt, revisited as an adult. The chests of drawers he'd spent 5 hours assembling had a complacent, solid look. The radio played a jangling tune Ed didn't recognise. The boards he'd sanded no longer creaked under his step. Goldie saw him first. The hair on his neck stood up, and a low, tuneful warble came from deep in his throat. "What's up, Goldie?" Nell asked, puckering her brow. The dog's tail sketched uncertain thumps as Ed walked around to his own side of the bed and got in beside Nell. The mattress stayed flattish, responding to the weight of Nell's body, but not his own. What now? Ed asked himself. Had he come all this way only to upset the dog? Nell ruffled Goldie's head. "Be quiet," she said. "I'll get your food soon, and then we'll go for it WALK." Goldie looked at her, then back at Ed. He gave a soft bark, more breath than sound. The news came on the radio, still on Ed's side of the bed. "Bloody news," Nell said to Goldie as she turned to reach for the switch. She stopped, blinked, looked again, blinked. A smile dawned. Her face lit. "Ed, it's you." No, he teased, you're dreaming. She touched his chest. You're warm, she gasped. You're real. Can I hug you, or will you disappear? I'm not sure, Ed said. I don't know how this works. He kissed her lips experimentally at first, then more firmly. Hers felt soft, but not responsive. He stroked the downy hairs at the nape of her neck. Can you feel my hand? I don't think so. My neck feels warm. Is your hand there? He should have been disappointed, but somehow he wasn't. He went on stroking her neck. You're so beautiful, Nell. No, I'm not. Nell made her automatic objection to compliments. You look the same as before. I hardly recognised you when the end of her sentence hung in the air. Ed had seen his own body when he'd left it after the crash, and it hadn't looked too clever. He supposed she'd had to identify it, but he'd been so far away by then. Poor Nell. Suddenly she clasped his arm. Where have you been? She said urgently. Tell me, what's it like there? The answer to her question hovered just out of reach, like a word on the tip of your tongue, a forgotten line of a song. I can't remember. I don't know how I got here even. It was a long way, I think. Why didn't you come back earlier? Nell's eyes reproached him. I missed you so much. Maybe I couldn't. You think about different things there. You get caught up in the process. So easily distracted, she said, with a trace of the proprietorial manner that used to irritate him. You haven't changed. Oh, but I have, he said. I have. He put his arms around his wife, inhaling her morning smell of new mown grass. Oh, Nell. My life was the best, he murmured as he laid his cheek against her hair. The soapy smell of her scalp seemed to fade as he spoke. Nell turned her face and stared as if trying to bring him into focus. Ed squeezed Nell's thin shoulders, studying her face. He saw her hands move to his own face, but he couldn't feel them. Don't go, said Nell. Not yet. He felt his body lift off the bed and drift upwards. He saw Nell reach for him. Then he was gone. That's the end. Thanks.
I think it's me next.
It is, Eileen.
It's me next, yes.
Yeah.
And have you got any supernatural stories?
I haven't got anything I want to share, no.
No. Well, thank you for your story. It was lovely. So my story is responding to the challenge that Sue gave us when we had the night for her poetry. And I must admit, I found it quite difficult, but this is written in the voice of somebody that thinks they're famous. And it's called To All My Public. They loved my stories. I know they do. My retold tales of ancient legends, putting women in their rightful place. For where were we ever meant to be, but in the foremost place in the picture of time? Men with their egos twisted, stupidly even tried to blackwash Eve, the mother of them all. The original stories that were told around the fires in ancient times gave women credit for bringing birth to those they reared and taught, women who made brave and beautiful warriors that honoured their mothers. Until the day that somebody whispered in the men's camp that women too were powerful. Women were too powerful. They needed to be subdued. After that, the idea caught on. Men were ever the weaker sex. They banned women from using the bow and spear. They were the weaker sex, but they had muscle strength and they were tall. Their mothers had taught them well. So with twisted words and brute strength, women gradually lost their power, gave it all to the men that they reared, started to believe that the blood that flowed from their bodies was a curse and not a goddess gift of life. All the goddess worship was gradually removed until she became a side figure to the mighty one male god. I heard the goddess though. I heard her most nights. She whispered to me, told me how it really was, how all the Greeks had mighty flaws like Achilles with his heel, because they pushed aside their mother's power and wisdom as they had learned to walk. And eventually their race turned to dust. When my books were first published, men wanted to burn them. Heresy, they said. They wouldn't hear the truth. History is just that, his story, in the voice of the victor. I knew the truth. My goddess whispers to me nightly, and the next day I write it down. Her words, my story, her story. Once the outcry had died down, my books were removed from the shelves. And I had a visitor. I was shocked because I knew her face. She had been Booker shortlisted twice in the last 3 years. May I come in, she said. I have a proposition. She said she loved my stories, thought she could help me. She was well known and published widely. She thought she could tell my stories with just a few alterations to make them slightly more subtle. It's the telling that's important, she said, not to whom they're attributed. And once established as a series, we could announce that they were mine. I just needed to be patient. Was I patient? She did adjust them, alter them. I thought they lost their excitement, their flow. However, they were acclaimed by the critics. A wonderful new slant on the classics, they called it. Putting women in their rightful place was another headline. The reviews were magical. My goddess was delighted. She said I should wait until the right time before I claimed the true authorship. Another volume was published. I could hear my voice ringing out loud and true through the pages, but the name was not mine. Surely the time had come. I called the publisher time after time, claiming my rights, and in the end they blocked my calls. I wrote to the papers, but when the piece was printed, the headline stated, "Delusional woman claims ownership of the next Booker winner." They made fun of me. It did get shortlisted. Then it won. That was bittersweet. She refused to see me. The police came round and told me to keep away. They looked at me sadly when I told them that she'd stolen my work, shook their heads as they went, muttering and laughing to each other. I decided I needed to do something. So I went out, I bought a new dress and shoes and had my hair restyled. The red carpet is amazing. I waited till her car drew up, and as she stepped out, I ducked under the rope and I clung onto her arm. "We can do this together," I said. "It's our book. It's time to tell the world." They pulled me off. She got the prize. I got this cell. My goddess says, "Be patient, my day will come." All that's coming for me now are 2 men in white coats with a big syringe. Yeah.
Sorry, Eileen, do you have a scary Halloween type story for us?
Yes, I'm quite intrigued by the cats actually, because since we've lived in this house, well, when we first moved in, we kept seeing a cat on the upstairs landing. And I didn't know Mike had seen it as well, black cat. And I used to have a black cat. And I used to think to myself, oh, I'm just thinking I'm seeing it. And then my niece came down and she said, gosh, she said, I nearly tripped over that cat on the landing. And then my sister came down and she saw it as well. And then we started to see, we say a lady because see the skirts, and you could almost hear the skirt. I know you can't hear a ghost, but you could sort of hear the skirts brushing along the landing. And I thought, oh, we're all a bit fanciful, you know. And then we were away, and my stepdaughter got the idea that she'd come. Obviously, I'm a terrible housewife. Came and hoover all the carpets, you know, with one of those things that shampoos them as well. Well, when we got back, she was nearly hysterical. I'm never going upstairs in your house again, she said. You've got a ghost upstairs. So she still won't go upstairs to the loo upstairs. So I think we have got a resident, somebody, but I mean, I don't find it any problem. The only time it ever was a problem was I got up one night in the middle of the night and I could hear a noise upstairs. And I kept saying to myself, this isn't real, ghosts don't make noises. And then suddenly this cat came running down the stairs, leapt across my feet, and I nearly fell over. I screamed for Mike, and I said, Mike, it's a cat. He said, I know, it's only the cat, don't worry. And of course, what had happened was the cat from across the road had come in during the day, gone up to the top of the house and slept. And then in the middle of the night when I got up and come down, and it was a real cat. And that really, really scared me, far, far more than the ghost cat. Yeah, so that's my story. But I mean, I'm quite sure there's some presence here, but it's very, very friendly, benign, no problem.
Okay, so this is called On the Trail of Jack the Tipex. Ollie, I think you wanted to dedicate this to one of our colleagues.
Oh yeah, well, I wanted to, I think first of all to say thank you to Mandy for all the organising, and also for putting up with Tom's endless requests as well. So I'll apologise on behalf of Tom and Tom for all those requests. But probably I should dedicate this performance to Vin, who's had the misfortune of hearing it twice in 2 nights, and like the proverbial, I suppose, raven sat on your fireplace over there. We're going to be talking the same nonsense at you 2 nights running. So you can shout nevermore if you want, or something along those lines. Anyway, yeah. So Mischief and Mayhem. We found a lot of mischief and mayhem, I suppose, in administrative processes. So we're going to do a performance dedicated to admin, hello admin, if you will, you know, since we're on nearly there now tomorrow, isn't it? Anyway, okay, so without further ado, let's get started. Thanks for calling our automated hotline, because all our customer service reps are busy right now, but we know you're on the phone and we'll be with you soon. Our records indicate it's going to be a lovely day, so leave your password at the tone. Now I'm locked in with aching fingers, just another raw statistic on the spreadsheet, just some lonely deadbeat waiting for his turn in the queue. Now I've been holding with the blues, been reading online FAQs, and they're just getting me confused, don't know what number to choose. 'Cause when I'm on hold, everything is accompanied by adagio for strings. Can you hear me smashing things on the end of the line? 'Cause when I'm on hold, honey, can't you see how the bastards never answer me? I've been sat here so patiently, I've been sat here all alone. I'm just sitting here waiting for my number to come. Well now, I could make another cup of tea, but you'd probably disconnect me every time I turn The speakerphone on, there's just a groan next door, and a lifetime of acrimony. I'm sat here hating myself, it's existential, I've been hating everyone else. It's cybernetic, all this hating and waiting and anticipating. I'm going insane. When I'm on hold, the panpipes play November Rain, the way it's meant to sound. Can you hear me digging my hole in the ground? Cause when I'm on hold, can't you see they're never gonna answer me? I'm just sitting here so patiently. I'm just sitting here all alone. I'm just sitting here waiting for my number to come. Waiting for my number to come. Thanks for calling our automated hotline. We're going to make you feel at home. 'Cause our records indicate you're going to have a lovely day. So leave your password at the tone.
Ah, hearing that tune makes me realize how much offices have changed. Come on, buddy, put the axe down, pour me another pissy beer, and I'll tell you a story about when I first joined the Bureau. By the Bureau, I don't mean an item of ghoulishly ugly yet utilitarian office furniture. I mean the Bureau of Investigation, Logistics and Warehouse Administration. I remember the day I was deputized, when I was made Deputy Business Support Assistant. Man, that was a hell of a time. Way back when, before all this candy ass working from home in your pajamas and wasting half your life listening to an automated dame who sounds like Keira Knightley shebang we got now. A state of affairs I blame on the pinko college kid shavetails who run the show these days. But in my day, every deputy had to turn up for their beat on the mean streets of our 3-story open plan executive workspace. And them streets was dangerous, I'm telling you. I remember my partner back then, Staples O'Hanrahan, a flame-haired Irish badass of the old school, almost getting whacked trying to collar Ted Monday, the serial skiver. That sick old Ted had taken 12 Mondays off in a row without permission from a GP. The DA, database auditor, was pissed off. He wanted Ted's ass delivered on a photocopying machine. This was a while back when asses and photocopying machines were integral aspects of a tolerable office Christmas party. So my buddy Staples took Ted down. He took him down to downtown, more specifically to our human resources drop-in porta cabin hub that's downtown just opposite Sainsbury's. Ted accepted a written warning, and the Bureau duly restored truth, justice, and the administrative way. A little after that, I caught this shitbird named Dillinger trying to heist $20 worth of hot treasury tags from the Lower East Side of the stationery cupboard. I took aim and got him in the leg with my 9mm post-it note, tiny little post-it note, about that size. But boy, could it deliver a paper cut. From then on, Dillinger was known as Public Memo Knee #1. But my greatest pinch was a perp who'd been on the lam for years. And I don't just mean he'd go to the kebab shop after our regular Friday night socials down the pub. He was a goddamn vandal, daubing obscene comments on everything from the Dyson hand dryer in the ladies' john to my high-back 4-lever executive chair with adjustable features to maximize ergonomics. So for me, this case was personal from the start. I got to study in Jack's MO, how he made these gruesome marks all over our beautiful office. My conclusion, classic psycho, A1 monster. My nickname for him, Jack the Tipex. I was trailing Jack, getting real close to him. I could feel it when I got called into City Hall to have my ass chewed by the chief of sales order processing. Chief Hewlett Packard was one of them commie-ass bureaucrats who think you can keep law and order in a globalized commercial workplace with both hands tied behind your back and both hands wrapped around your nuts simultaneously.
Deputy!
He yelled at me, banging his fist on the desk.
In my bureau, I would not have mavericks, renegades, or loose Pritt sticks.
Chief, there's no need to go postal over this, even if you did recently transfer from mailroom operations systems. Packard passes me a fat beige foolscap folder with Lucky Strike burns all over it.
Deputy, here's a list of all your departmental breaches, kid. Internal Affairs have got a hard-on for you, and I can't protect you no more. You're a disgrace to your $50 Primark suits. You're suspended, and if by some miracle you ever come back, I'm busting your ass downtown to spreadsheets.
Spreadsheets? You mean Excel confidential, sir?
Deputy, give me your name badge and your third floor access swipe card now.
So I grudgingly hand over my badge and card. Then you know what? I decide I'm going rogue, because I may not speak the language of the pen pushers and the paperclip fondlers, but the language I speak gets results. In their language, they say serious violations of human rights. In my language, I say justice. That very night, I'd get me a tip-off about Mr. Tip-X. One of my snitches saw him sniffing round the stand-in desks in one of the employee development breakout spaces, where we'd had a breakout just the previous week of some jailbirds who'd been arraigned on charges of contaminating the coffee machine with something that tastes kind of nice. So I hightail it there and find this freak with a stoned glaze over his eyes, like he'd been mainlining janitorial multi-surface cleaning fluid. He tries to run, but stumbles, as stumblebums will, and falls on his, yes, you've guessed it, his ass. I reach for my shoulder holster and pull out my 44. The 44 is the name we give to our departmental disciplinary forms. Say hello to my little friend, I shout. Problem is, I had an envelope of these forms, but I didn't know how many was left. Jack knew that I knew that, so he grinned, a big, stupid, scary grin. I know what you're thinking, I said. Did he hand out 6 written warnings today, or only 5? Well, to tell you the truth, in all this excitement, I kind of lost track myself. But being that this is a 44 form that constitutes the most severe disciplinary action we can take in this company and would blow your career clean off, you've got to ask yourself one question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk? To which he said nothing. He just looked at me like I'd fallen off the top of the corporate structure tree and hit my head on every executive branch on the way down. Get up, I said, and stick 'em up. He did as he was told and dropped his bottle of Tipp-Ex to the floor.
Ain't you gonna read me my rights?
He said.
Cuff me, take me into custody, mate.
Why, so you can sit in our nice, comfortable reception area, recently refurbished by Shoot to Kill Interior Solutions Limited of Walton on the Naze, while your smart-ass lawyer cops an insanity plea? That the idea, punk?
What's it to you, Deputy? You've got to take me in.
Well, there's some good news, I said, and there's some bad news. The good news is, you're right, I am a deputy business support assistant, and I got to take you in. The bad news is I've been suspended. And I don't give a freaking great big packet of ROHS compliant, non-flammable, alcohol-free, anti-static screen wipes about that. Way I see it, I delivered justice that day. But the lefty liberal lame-os at City Hall thought otherwise, and well, here I am now with you, drinking my pissy beer and smoking these coffin nails. They was hard days on the admin scene, but I ain't got no regrets, because I did what was right for the flag, the people, and most of all, for the office. Thank you.
Good stuff as usual, Tom, Ollie. Thank you.
That was fantastic, Tom.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
There's a lot of laughter in all the screens. I've got some shots of that, so I'll be sharing those later. So Tom, Ollie, whichever one of you wants to go first, because I'm aware there may be a ring of the bell while we're talking, but have you got any personal stories of strange occurrences to share?
Yeah, I do, and it involves Alex, who you just saw earlier with his excellent story about the giant swan, because he and I worked together in Ivory Coast. He was my photographer while I was researching a guidebook, and we did some journalistic articles together in 2015. And I think it was on September the 11th, 2015, which was weirdly the day Jeremy Corbyn was elected, and obviously that's become quite a newsworthy issue again lately, and not for good reasons, in my opinion. And we went the morning before we flew out. I don't know what the hell we were thinking. For someone who isn't very superstitious, I was really kind of pushing it. If I was superstitious, we wouldn't have done that probably. But we went to visit a fetisheur, which is a kind of Ivorian shaman, shamanic kind of priest type person, because we wanted to see what a shamanic ritual would be like. We thought it'd be an interesting thing to write about and to photograph. And this guy, to cut a long story short, he sort of, you know, he did this kind of show where the main thing I remember is where he killed a live chicken. I'm sorry, people, I haven't offended anyone, anyone's animal rights sensibilities. He claimed to have just laid his hand on this chicken and killed it. Me and Alex thought that he'd pressed a bit hard and probably just choked it to death. So we were kind of we were sort of wondering, both being sort of skeptics, I suppose, about these things. We weren't sure what we'd seen really, and how much of it was just sort of someone, you know, taking the mickey a bit. But I remember 6 months later, I got word that this guy had died. Andre, his name was. Andre the Shaman was the sort of section in the book that we did about him. And the messages we were getting from our friends in Ivory Coast was that he had sort of sailed too close to the kind of dark side of, you know, being a shaman and everything. But it could have been anything. So I suppose I remain sort of open-minded about these things, and but that's the nearest I've come anyway, I think, to some kind of supernatural experience.
Hey, thanks, Tom.
Yeah,
How about you, Ollie?
I must say, no, we hear a lot. I guess we hear a lot. We hear noises in our house, and it would. I can't say I've ever seen anything, but it would be nice to think there might be a ghost rather than just rats or something. But I must be honest. I've never seen a ghost, and I've not got much to share on that really. Sorry.
No worries. Thank you, guys. That was an amazing performance as well. Fantastic. So I'm going to bring you a story that I performed, I think, only a year ago, in fact, but it seemed the most appropriate one for me to do tonight. I've tweaked a couple of things within it, but it's called Pennies for the Wherry Man, and it's a story based in Portsmouth. We all know the tales about paying your way across the stretches of water that did divide us from this life and the next. But here, between the Sallyport and Turktown, that wasn't quite how it was done, and Joshua Symes was well aware of it. For it was his job to row corpses between here and there, a job that took place only at night when the rats ran free and the only sounds were the plash of his oars and the wails of the lately bereaved. Born in 1678, he was a superstitious man, but if someone needed to make a living from the backs of the dead, it might as well be him. It was a job that paid well, but Joshua had the upkeep of his boat to consider, so his boards were regularly tarred. He swore by the bitumen he used, saying it cleared his lungs of the breath of the dead. Then there was the fee to dock. the cost depending how much ballast he unloaded. Hefting the bodies, tasting their reek on a nightly basis, he had no wish to meet his maker before his time. So a few drams of rum kept the damp from his bones as he worried away. None of it came cheap. 2 pennies for a flag-wrapped tar, 3 farthing for a linened child, a whore a halfpence more, he charged, each bound round by him with rope. He took pride in his tying, a crisscross held with clove hitches and finished with a reef. 5 pence for a coffined corpse, lids not secured in case the excise man came looking. Joshua had often thought a false bottom in his boat wouldn't be hard to fashion. The opportunities were regular, but he'd seen the outcomes of dockside battles, slit throats, or the peppering embrace of a blunderbuss. No, he'd stick to the dead, who generally lay quiet as they were rowed towards the other shore. Besides, the becoffined offered something on the side. It was still the custom to place pennies on the eyes of the dear departed, even by the enlightened, but this was hardly recognised on God's port side, who thought Portsmouth's rich a beggarly lot, as those coins didn't stay where placed. They were surely better in Joshua's hand than someone else's, and who would know? And they wouldn't have, except, you see, he'd taken a cue from the smugglers after all, saw their drop-offs in the dead of night, and that in the deeper channels became his practice. Children of the poor were easiest, weighed down with a goodly stone. Their slipping into the water on the foggiest of nights hardly made a sound, and if children were all there were that night, well, he had only half the journey before he turned home. But he hadn't reckoned on the current. The smuggler's rum was dropped shallow to be picked up soon. Joshua's bodies needed to stay down. Instead, though, they rolled with the suck and the pull of the sea. It was 2 years before the first was found. A poor little mite, fish nibbled and minus much of its flesh. They came in thick and fast after that, most making their way down the coast, where a shore scavenger and his wife spoke quiet prayers over newly dug sand graves. The children of paupers, the jetsam, was best then forgotten, as Portsmouth had done. That is, until after a squall. Joshua lay in his boat, his belly sunk with rum, looking more like his cargo than him, as the watchman pulled the bundle from the surf. Recognising the knotwork and having lost a child of his own, he was incensed. But burial at sea was not illegal. Besides, it would be hard to prove Joshua's hand. It was just as likely someone on the misnamed God's port side had taken money for a grave and saved themselves the work. Instead, the watchman and his excise chums rowed themselves out near the deeps and waited. They knew a coffin and 3 children to be on board Joshua's boat. Soon enough, blithe Josh came by, stopping to slide the 3 smallpoxed bodies into the brine. So confident was he that he took the stillness of night as a blanket, his grunts covering the softer sounds of the boats now surrounding him. And so it was that Joshua Symes was caught in his misdemeanour. But it was the return of the coffin to Portsmouth shore and the discovery of 2 polished pennies in his possession and none on the eyes of the town warden's wife that saw him hanged on the 29th of October 1720, exactly 200 years ago today. Right here, from the roof of this place, where his body stayed rotting, pecked by the birds until it dropped bit by bit to the sea. And it is said that his corpse can be heard knocking, asking to be let in, for he fears the souls of those departed that he sent to Old Briney, and that he's looking for someone to go in his place. So as you leave here later tonight, be careful. And if you hear him, throw him a penny and run for your life. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mandy. And do you have any tales of the macabre or the eldritch with which to regale us?
Ah, the eldritch. Well, I have so many, to be honest, but because of that, I'm going to go for the very early one that I can remember. I was 12 years old, and from school we took a walk down into the town to go on a little trip round to have historical places pointed out to us. Well, I was a dawdler, and I used to live in a bit of a dream world most of the time. Nothing much has changed, I have to say. But I lagged behind everybody else. And in doing so, I missed a lot of what was being said. And the group were moving on ahead of me. And we came to a little corner by an inn, I suppose, a coaching inn originally. And the group moved off, and I was kind of vaguely still stood there, not realizing they'd gone. And suddenly I felt a tap on my shoulder. And I turned round, and there was absolutely nobody there, just nobody. It kind of freaked me out a bit, but I thought, okay, well, I need to catch up because I'm going to be in trouble. And as I walked away, I heard whispered twice in the ear of that same shoulder that had been tapped, my name, Mandy Walton. It's Mandy Walton. And I just kind of froze because there was absolutely no one around me. I went home later that day and I told this to my father, not understanding at the time that that was one of the symptoms that was experienced by my mother, was auditory hallucinations. So my father must have been terrified by hearing that story. He didn't let on to me. But in fact, it was probably another 12 years on when I was doing some research in the local library for genealogical purposes that I discovered that in that very same corner of the town had been an event wherein 3 different branches of my family had been eviscerated, hung, drawn and quartered. And they had been body snatchers. But it wasn't until 12 years later that I knew that. And I have always wondered if that was one of them.
Wow.
Connecting back to the present. So that's my story. Thank you.
Sleep well, everyone. Sleep well, won't you? Yes. Well, thank you very much, Mandy. That's wonderful. Well, there we are. Can I just say, Tom and Ollie, thank you. It definitely repaid a repeat. I very much enjoyed it. Thank you. Lovely stuff. Lovely stuff. Now, you know when you get to the end of a very, very long meal and you are replete and you're stretching and you're thinking, I may just about say to my hosts, it's time for me to go and get in the car and go home. And they bring out the after-dinner mince. Now, that's my job this evening. I am the after-dinner mince. Not just any after-dinner mince. You know, the ones you've had in the back of the cupboard since 1997. And when you get them out, the chocolate has done that mosaic thing where it started to separate into its constituent parts, and bits of the white goo have emerged through the carapace and stuck themselves to the black paper. And even though you can barely steel yourself to the alien mass in front of you, it's chocolate, so you eat it anyway. Well, that's what I'm going to do for you now. So, a few Clara Hues, which I only do once a year in the hope that you'll have forgotten them. There are a couple of new ones in here, but they're based around Gothic horror authors or characters. So a few little tidbits to send you off into the night. For those of you who don't know what Clara Hues are, they're tiny little poems based around the surname of the person you're talking about. They're a little bit like haiku, only with no self-respect. And instead of 17 syllables, you have to have 17 moments of doubt when you write them. Here we go. The pale and sickly Edgar Allan Poe used makeup in public for a healthy glow, and his use of rouge made the audience catch their breath whenever he read The Mask of the Red Death. He did wear makeup in public, actually. Oh, here we are. To his publisher, H.P. Lovecraft, wrote, "Kindly approve the above draft." Then he nipped to the privy and joined the queue to answer the call of Cthulhu. To M.R. James, who always forgot his dog's names, his spaniel said, "Don't let it drive you mad, just whistle and I'll come to you, my lad." Sorry. The efforts of Count Dracula at origami were spectacular, but the thought of folding tiny little creases made Frankenstein's monster fall to pieces. The critics told Sheridan Le Fanu that mentioning opium just wouldn't do. But when he called it laudanum, they wouldn't stop applauding him. Yeah. Researching prison life, Henry James joined in with the inmates' games. The warders played cards too, so he often awaited the turn of the screw. When he felt he was turning into Mr. Hyde, Dr. Jekyll broke down and cried. But Gertrude Jekyll thought it quite a lark whenever she turned in to Hyde Park. And last but not least, you can go soon, Gaston Leroux wrote songs for creatures that flew. After an early success with some lyrical Lepidoptera, came his Bantam of the Opera. There we are. Thank you so much, everybody, for all your wonderful stories, the macabre and the ghostly.
Encore!
Encore, encore, come on.
Bravo. Encore.
I have no more ghostly tales. I've got some artists. Do you want some artists?
Go on. Yeah.
It won't take long. All right, then. Okay. After eating too many eggs, Leonardo was incommunicado. But he'd saved some back that was sent by the German emperor, so at least he didn't lose his tempera. Michelangelo, balanced on a flange below, the ceiling of the chapel while he painted Adam's apple. I'm not sure I understand this one. Poor Pablo Picasso once fell in the Sargasso. His restorative Dubonnet was paid for by Claude Monet. The final one, here we are. Dante Gabriel Rossetti liked to smoke in the Serengeti. There, this noted pre-Raphaelite accidentally set a giraffe alight. Anyway, thank you very much. What a wonderful evening. Lovely. I've really enjoyed this evening, so thank you. Mandy, did you want to say a sign off?
Well, firstly, I want to ask you if you have a tale to tell.
Oh, all right. When I think I was about 15, I think, and I used to belong to a group of kids who made films in the summer, you know, for fun, and send off to screen test, was it, or whatever it was, in the summer. And we were in Fort Purbrook, and some of you who live locally may have heard of the ghosts of Fort Purbrook. And underground, there are two long tunnels. There's a brick tunnel and there's a chalk tunnel. And I should say to you that I'm not sure I believe in ghosts, but I do believe in people who believe in ghosts. And we were laying some cables down the chalky tunnel, and these tunnels I think were about a couple of 100 meters long, so they're quite long underground. But at the end, they come out into some rooms in the moat, so daylight does come through at the very end of them. And I was with my friend Dave halfway down Chalky Tunnel laying some cables, and we heard this high-pitched scream. And there's a central area that the tunnels come off. And we turned back up to the central area, and the scream had come from 6'4" a guy called Matt, who's now a police dog. And he was very susceptible to these things and was convinced he'd seen the ghost. And we ran up to him and he said, "There's Rob," our other friend. And we ran down the other tunnel and found my friend Rob, who was a very pragmatic chap and convinced that ghosts don't exist. And he was leant back against the side of the tunnel like a door, but quite clearly like a letter opener. Only a 6'4" letter opener. And he had dropped his torch, which had smashed on the floor, and he was in clinical shock. And my friend Dave and I took Rob and we took him up to the room we were staying in up top and put him in a sleeping bag, and he took around about half an hour to come out of this. And basically what he said afterwards was that he'd been walking down the tunnel and there was a patch of light. He saw patches of light come through from the windows down the bottom. And Matt, who thought he could see everything, had been saying, "Rob, don't go any nearer, don't go any nearer." And Rob said he was just thinking it's a patch of light, and suddenly he said this patch of light turned around and looked at him. And that was when he dropped the torch, etc., etc. Now, you know, being kids, this was much mythologized, and one of us, even friend Simon, actually wrote a little pamphlet all about it, which he shared amongst everybody. But I suspect it was suggestion from somebody shouting behind you, "Look out, it's a ghost, it's a ghost." And there's that thing, is it paradosia or something, where we see patterns in shapes? And I think maybe, you know, the power of suggestion. But there are lots of stories about the ghost of Fort Purbrook.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Mandy.
And why there's no analgesics in the jungle.
You're mute, Mandy.
Okay, thanks, Finn. Thank you, everybody, indeed. I hope you've enjoyed this evening. I know I have. Been a huge variety of stories shared and quite a few new people on board tonight as well. And if you have enjoyed your experience with us tonight, then we hope you will return on another occasion. I think probably there won't be much now until Bookfest, which will start in the middle of February, because I have quite a bit to do between now and then, which I need to focus on something else. But if anyone else wants to, from the group, wants to raise an event, then we can certainly sort that out, of course. I hope you've taken note of Trisha's offering to us. So hers is a weekly event, and the link is in the chat. I've copied that and I can circulate it to the group as well. Okay, and I can see Alex is sharing something there as well, which I believe is a recording of his efforts tonight. I'm not sure that this was live streamed, but I have got a recording of it. So if it hasn't gone out stream, then I will put the recording up on our Facebook events page. So for those of you who are not in the know, that's articulation events. And so a recording of this will be on there. That might take me till tomorrow to do, because I've got to wait for the recording to convert after we've finished. And there'll be news about our blog soon. There's been a few technical hitches which I explained to people who were on the call early. I won't go into them now, but we should be up and running fairly soon with that. So I hope you'll look forward to that as well. If anybody wants to stay on for a little while to chat, then you're welcome to do that. We've got a paid account, so we won't be kicked off. And I'm going to probably bow out, but I won't leave to finish it for everybody. I shall just switch my video off and my sound and go and do some things that I need to do. But thanks again, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you'll be back, and that we'll have some more fun sometime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy.
Bye.
Thank you, Candy. Cheers, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Excellent stuff.
When is the next one?
Mandy said the next
Sorry.
one.
Book fest, Alex. We've got to finalise what's going to be on which day. But I think we've got 5 or 6 events in book fest.
So that's usually February or March. So
Yeah.
February, March. Okay.
as Mandy says, you know, we might put something on before then if somebody wants to do it.
Yeah, we'll keep you informed if something comes up, Alex, and everyone
Great.
else. So, Trisha, I'll be in touch so that we can, you know, get something going across the water, maybe.
Yeah, great to have you here, Trisha. Lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you, Britta. I think Mel, who was here, has gone. But yeah, thanks to the guests as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Enjoy it. Good work, everybody.
Good evening.
Here we go.
Jackie, I don't know if you're going off soon, but I'm just interested in your background. Is that real or?
Yeah, I was looking when I think it was Eileen, wasn't it, mentioned about the green screen kind of weird effect behind somebody. I thought, oh, I'm going to play, and yeah, this is a picture of Highgate Cemetery. Oh God, I can't say it.
Highgate Cemetery.
That yeah, I took last year, and I thought, well, it was just a folder on the computer when I went into the playing with it, and I thought, oh, yeah, that's quite Halloween.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it's good. Love it. Yeah.
I just got that up on the 4th screen actually, because I could see it on the small screen. It looks really good. Yeah.
Yeah, so here I am amongst the graves.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Right, guys, I'm going to say good night now. It's been nice to see you all again.
Yeah,
And
good night, because I'm quite tired.
Okay.
It's been great.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Great stuff.
Bye.
Night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Just say
Bye.
bye a few times because there's lots of Sues. Bye, Eileen.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yes, good night.
Oh, we're getting bigger.
Very good stuff.
Yeah, lovely evening. Well done.
Loved your drabbles. Loved your drabbles tonight, Linda.
Very good.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Lovely stuff.
Yes, very good stuff from everyone. Yeah.
Looks
Well,
like
good
a
night.
ghost behind your head, Chris. No, sorry. There is a ghost behind my head. Ah.
Yeah, I wasn't sure when it appeared. I wasn't conscious of it to start with, but then there it was.
Well, that's my mask from Venice, which when I went with Chris first time, I think you can paint them, of course, but it's just that's just a plain mask. So yeah, it's genuine Venetian.
Lovely.
Chris. Yeah.
Beautifully made, aren't they?
Yeah, not bad.
Is it papier-mâché?
sort of, yeah, I think it's papier-mâché. Yeah.
There is stuff
Put on a mould. Or there's a bit of muslin cloth, I think. That's the.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gone a bit mouldy now.
It always makes me think of Edgar Allan Poe's, I think it's is it the Cask of Amontillado, which is set around the Venice Festival.
Yeah.
Somebody ends up bricked up in a wine cellar.
Oh.
Well, if it's going to be anywhere, a wine cellar would be the best place. But it was a fairly common thing to do.
Brick people up.
Brick people up in cellars, yeah.
Yeah.
If someone was suspected of being a witch, that might be something that was done.
I'll make a note of that.
Yeah. These days you won't be able to get the builders.
No. Yeah.
Or the wattle and daub.
Daub. Oh wow.
Yeah, I'm mortified.
Oh.
I wasn't, but I am now.
Yeah. Well, we're all probably flagging a bit. Amanda, you said you're going to.
Yeah, I need the loo. That's why.
Ah, right. Okay.
Very well.
Well,
and drink. I've not had any alcohol yet.
What?
Oh.
No. That was not a pint of vodka or vodka. It was elderflower cordial.
Oh.
Very nice.
That's the most shocking story tonight.
Yeah.
I'm horrified.
Anyway, I solved the problem of my noisy computer that was sounding like a diesel generator. But
Yeah, what was it?
well, it needed a good thrashing.
Digital thrashing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
They're real good.
Are we going to try and maybe meet soon then, the four of us, to talk about Bookfest?
Well, I think it needs to be online.
Yeah.
I've suggested, I think I sent it in an email suggesting Monday or Tuesday maybe.
Yeah.
Or possibly lunchtime Wednesday, but I think that's a bit difficult. And I think we've come down to Monday or Tuesday between some point between 1 and 4.
I replied earlier. I think I can. Let me just have a look.
I've not seen that, Vin.
Yeah, that's all right. I think it was at 4 on Tuesday. I could do.
Right. I think Eileen can only do it until 4. Let me just double check that.
Sure. Yeah, I have a meeting from 2 to 4.
Right. Okay. So that's which day?
That's the Tuesday.
Okay. Can't see your email. Let me do it as a search.
My friend.
It was this afternoon at 19 minutes past 2.
Yeah, I've got it.
You found it, yeah.
Is that the only time you can do?
What did I say? I can't remember now.
We could do something maybe on Thursday.
Thursday between 3:30 and 4:30 I can do.
3:30 to 4:30.
Well, yeah, 4.
Thursday. Nothing on Monday.
Monday, I'm free between 3 and 4 or after 5.
Monday 3 till 4.
Yeah.
Or after 5. Okay.
Yeah.
Any ideas, Richard?
Yeah, ideas about anything in particular. Me and Chris were chatting. Sorry.
Whoops. Sorry.
So times that Vin can make on Monday 3 till 4 or after 5.
Okay.
4 on Tuesday or 3:30 to 4. Was it just 3:30 to 4 on Thursday?
Sorry, let me just open that again. No, I can do 3:30 to 4:30.
To 4:30, right? Okay.
Um,
Because what Eileen
yeah.
has come back and said is she can do from any either Monday or Tuesday. She can do from 2 till 4. So we could do an hour on Monday, 3 till 4. That looks the most likely.
Yeah. The only unknown for me is I'm waiting for. I thought I'd get it today, but waiting for a message from the hospital about picking up my hearing aid. But I have no idea when that'll be. So I can work around it because I just when I know it's ready, I go and pick it up. So that might be Monday. But I mean, if you choose Monday, I can work around it.
Okay. Did you speak? Can I ask? In this company, did you speak to them about it? Because I know Malcolm, who took his hearing aid for a repair, and they're posting it back to him.
Well, I left my address, but I hope they're not posting it because they don't take any responsibility for any loss, and then you end up having to pay for a new one. So I didn't ask them to send it. I just gave them my details so they could identify me. So I think if you post it to them, they'll post it back. But
No, I know he took it in, but they said they would post it back. But
but
that may have been after a conversation they had with him.
Yeah, I'd be a bit annoyed if they did that, having said they take no responsibility for it. Because I mean, it could be 300 quid or something, to replace it. So, yeah, but at the reception desk, my case would be that she said they text me or phone me to say it was ready for collection.
Okay.
It's a fag going up on the bus, but I didn't want. Things don't get lost in the post usually, but I want to risk it.
Best not to take the chance.
Well,
might also get damaged again.
Yeah, maybe.
That's the other thing.
Okay.
So should we pencil in 3 till 4 on Monday then? And I'll let Eileen know.
Yeah, all right.
Okay. Brilliant.
Cool.
And what I'll do is I'll prep some stuff and send it to you beforehand so that hopefully we can be quite quick.
Great. Okay, thanks, Mandy. Thanks for everything tonight too. Brilliant.
Yeah, well done. Lovely stuff.
A lot of hard work.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it kind of falls into place, really.
I think you put it into place, and the falling is.
I wasn't sure about. I was sure that I wanted, and people seemed to be happy to do the storytelling, the extra bit, but I wasn't sure whether to do that in little clumps or to do it one after the other. But it meant doing one after the other meant that there was no huge focus on one person leading everything, which
was lovely.
Which I think was okay, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And most people remembered to do it.
Yeah, just a couple. Yeah. There might have been some difficulty with a couple of people in the sequencing. Shall I say? Sue Harper and Linda.
Yeah.
Well, there's also some challenge about sound, wasn't there? Muting something.
Yeah, I keep going in and muting Paul Valentine and Sue Harper, and I don't know if they know that I do it. But Sue Harper always knows to unmute herself again.
Yeah.
Bless her.
Okay.
Okay.
Have a good weekend, everybody. And
yeah, and you, Vin. It's good to see you.
Yeah.
Cheers, Vin.
Lovely evening. Take care. Nice.
Take care.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for finishing us off with your Clericus. Good uplift.
We finished off with the Clericus is really the proper thing to do. I wish I could do that properly, but
One more couplet and we're there. Take care, folks.
Okay.
cheers.
All right then.
Bye then.
Cheers. Okay, Mandy, thanks a lot.
Okay. See you soon, guys.
Cheers, Mandy.
Yeah, solidarity.
Great work.
Oh, that's a conversation for another time.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, we're winding up here.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
going to
cheers.
close it for everyone. Okay.
Say that again.
I'm closing for everyone. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cheers. Thanks,
Bye.
Mandy.
Bye.